Hi guys, and welcome to Gentle History for Deep Sleep. Tonight we step onto the Oregon Trail just as autumn begins to lose its nerve. You stand beside a creaking wagon beneath a sky the colour of old pewter, breathing air that feels too sharp for the season. The oxen snort pale clouds. Frost clings to the grass before sunset. Somewhere beyond the low hills, geese are already flying south in restless, ragged lines. You probably will not survive this, which is not the most comforting thought for bedtime. But fortunately you are listening from somewhere warm, with no need to repair an axle in sleet. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me where you are listening from, along with your local time. It is strangely comforting to imagine all those quiet rooms scattered across the world. Now, dim the lights, and let the wagon wheels begin their slow complaint beneath you. You are several months into a journey that has already rearranged your sense of distance. Your family has crossed rivers, baked beneath summer sun, and learned that dust can enter almost anything. The Oregon Trail is not one single road with tidy markers. It is a broad corridor of ruts, shortcuts, river crossings, campsites, and remembered advice stretching roughly 2,000 miles from the Missouri River toward the Pacific Northwest. Thousands of emigrants travel it during the Great Migration decades of the 19th century, usually hoping to reach Oregon country before winter closes the mountain passes. That simple deadline shapes nearly every decision you make. Most families begin in spring because grass must be available for the animals, rivers should not be too swollen, and the final mountains must be crossed before deep snow. Yet schedules slip. Now, as you walk beside the wagon, the season begins whispering that your careful timetable has failed. The first warning is not snow, it is silence. Even the oxen appear more serious, lowering their heads as if they have received troubling information from the weather. You notice the sun dropping earlier each day. Shadows stretch across the trail before supper. The warmth disappears quickly once the light leaves. When you wake, the water bucket wears a thin lid of ice. You tap it with a spoon and hear a delicate crack, a lovely sound under other circumstances like glass in a drawing room. Here it is a message. An older traveller named Mr. Bell crouches near the morning fire and studies the frost. He says the ground should not be this hard yet. A quirky belief among some travellers is that unusually thick animal coats predict a severe winter. Modern science would not trust a single furry ox as a seasonal forecast. But when you have no weather map, no radio, and no cheerful presenter pointing at blue arrows, the ox begins to look surprisingly authoritative. The clouds deepen from white to grey. They move differently now, low and layered, dragging long veils across the western horizon. Wind arrives from the north and carries a clean metallic smell. It slips beneath your collar. It finds the gap at your wrist. It makes the canvas wagon cover snap like a loose sail. You pull your shawl tighter and listen to the talk around camp. The cold changes familiar smells as well. Damp canvas carries a sour scent, wood smoke hangs low, and the animals smell warmer than the air around them. You find yourself lingering near their broadsides while pretending to check a harness. No one admits to borrowing heat from an ox, but dignity has limited value when your fingers are numb. Some insist this is only an early cold spell. They say the sun will return. Others glance toward the mountains and count the remaining days. A guide scratches figures in the dirt with a stick. Perhaps 100 miles to the next fort, perhaps more. Historians still argue whether emigrant parties usually understood the full danger of seasonal delay, or whether optimism, poor information, and social pressure kept many families moving long after caution should have stopped them. You feel that conflict inside your own camp. Stopping too early has risks. Grass may vanish. Food may run short. A chosen campsite may offer little wood or water. Moving on also has risks, especially if snow buries the trail or traps wagons in high country. Every choice feels like a door closing behind you. At supper, you eat beans thickened with a little flour. Smoke stings your eyes. The children sit close to the fire, unusually quiet, holding tin plates in both hands for warmth. One asks whether winter can find you before you reach Oregon. No one answers immediately. The fire cracks. An ox bell sounds somewhere in the dark. Beyond the wagons, prairie grass bends under a wind that has grown colder since sunset. You remember how the journey began with bright mornings, crowded departure grounds, and excited talk of rich soil in the west. Now warmth becomes another calculation. Blankets are counted, shoes are inspected, flour barrels are checked by lantern light. The wagon master asks each household how much bacon remains, and everyone suddenly becomes vague. Before sleep you step beyond the firelight. The sky has cleared, but that offers no comfort. Stars burn with sharp brilliance. Your breath drifts before you. Beneath your boots, frozen grass whispers and snaps. Far to the west, the horizon rises black against the stars, the distant shape of country you must still cross. Then you hear geese overhead. You cannot see them at first, only their calls moving through the darkness, mournful and organized. They know where they're going. They do not need a wagon tongue repaired, or an argument settled, or a child persuaded to swallow bitter medicine. They simply follow the seasons south. A few flakes begin to fall. They are sparse, almost polite, turning slowly in the lantern glow. One lands on your sleeve and remains there longer than it should. Another settles on the wagon wheel. By dawn the ground is white. Not deep, not yet. Only a thin covering that softens the ruts and outlines every hoofprint. The children stare with wonder. The adults do not. Men walk the camp looking north, west, and upward. Women shake snow from blankets and begin packing with quicker hands. The trail ahead has disappeared beneath the pale surface, but its direction remains known. The question is no longer whether winter is coming. The question is whether you dare to meet it while moving, or whether you search for a place to stop before the sky decides for you. You stand beside the buried ruts while the camp slowly wakes around you, and every sound seems sharpened by the cold. Harness rings knock softly against wood. A child coughs beneath a quilt. Someone splits a frozen stick and mutters when it breaks in the wrong place. The snow is still shallow, but it has changed the world. Yesterday the trail looked difficult. This morning it looks uncertain. Men walk ahead with long branches, probing the white ground for wagon ruts, holes and stones. Women gather near the fires, speaking quietly about flour, blankets, and the condition of the children. No one says the word panic. People rarely announce panic when they are busy performing it politely. The wagon captain calls everyone together after breakfast. You gather in a loose circle, stamping your feet and folding your arms against the wind. Faces that once looked sunburned now appear pale beneath wool caps and bonnets. The captain kneels and draws a rough map in the snow with a stick. Behind you lies open country that offers little shelter. Ahead stands a river valley where timber may be found. Beyond that, the land begins to rise toward harder country. The captain explains the choices as simply as he can. You may remain here and build shelter, though there is almost no wood. You may turn back toward a campsite past 2 days earlier, though returning means surrendering precious distance and perhaps finding the grass already eaten. Or you may push forward toward the wooded valley and hope the snow remains light. A murmur moves through the group. On the Oregon Trail, wagon companies often make decisions through discussion rather than military command. Captains can advise, organize crossings, and settle disputes, but families still own their wagons and supplies. A company can vote, divide, or ignore its leadership entirely. Democracy sounds noble beside a warm fireplace. In freezing wind, it can become 30 people arguing about a river they cannot yet see. Mr. Bell believes you should move. He points toward the west and says the wind is steady, which may mean the weather will clear. Another man says steady wind means more snow. Both speak with complete confidence, which is one of the oldest warning signs known to humanity. Mrs. Reed listens without interrupting. She has watched the children grow tired over the last week. She knows 2 oxen are limping. She also knows the family has enough flour for perhaps 6 weeks if portions are reduced, though she has told no one the exact amount. You notice how survival decisions are shaped by information that remains hidden inside separate wagons. One family knows its axle is cracking, another has almost no salt, another has 3 healthy animals and enough bacon to smell wealthy. The captain asks each household to report honestly. A few people do. Others answer with careful phrases such as adequate, manageable, and not too bad. Those words drift into the cold air and become almost useless. You return to your wagon to count supplies. There are sacks of flour, a small quantity of cornmeal, dried beans, coffee, salt, a little sugar, and strips of bacon wrapped in cloth. The bedding feels damp. One spare boot has split along the side. A wooden chest contains needles, thread, a Bible, letters from home, and several objects that seemed essential in Missouri but now look absurdly luxurious. A polished serving dish is among them. It has survived rivers, dust storms, and hundreds of miles only to become a very elegant burden. Some emigrants discard furniture, books, iron tools, and household treasures along the trail when animals weaken. Travellers later describe roadsides scattered with abandoned possessions, creating a strange moving museum of failed expectations. A piano has even become part of Oregon Trail folklore, though accounts differ about how many such instruments truly made it far beyond the departure towns. Historians continue to debate whether the most dramatic stories of abandoned luxury reflect common experience or memorable exceptions repeated because they make better tales. You lift the serving dish, consider its weight, and place it in the discard pile. It feels disloyal. The dish belonged to your mother. It carries the memory of Sunday dinners, warm bread, and a room where weather remained outside. Yet memory weighs several pounds, and the oxen are already tired. Around the camp, other families make similar choices. A chair is left beside the ashes, a box of books is opened, and only 2 volumes are kept. A man removes an iron stove from his wagon, stares at it for a long moment, then abandons it with such sorrow that you might think he is leaving a relative. By late morning the debate resumes. A hunter has walked several miles ahead and reports that the snow remains shallow. He also sees dark timber in the distance. The valley may be reached before nightfall if the wagons travel steadily. May be reached. Those 3 words carry the whole decision. You study the sky. The clouds have thinned, but the sun is only a pale disk. Snow slips from the canvas in small, soft heaps. The animals chew slowly, their breath curling around their faces. You imagine remaining here. The open plain provides almost no protection from wind. Buffalo chips can serve as fuel, but the snow may bury them. Water must be melted or carried from a shallow creek already forming ice. If the storm deepens, the wagons will stand exposed like small boats on a white sea. Then you imagine moving. Wheels may freeze, animals may fall, a hidden rut may break an axle. The valley could be farther than the hunter believes. Darkness may catch you on the open trail. There is no safe choice, only a choice that contains the fewest obvious dangers. Mrs. Reed speaks at last. She says the children cannot remain in the wind. She says timber means fuel, shelter, and material for repairs. She says moving now is dangerous, but waiting will not make the animals stronger. Her calm voice settles the discussion more effectively than the captain's map. Families begin nodding. The company votes to move forward. Almost immediately the camp changes shape. Blankets are rolled. Fires are smothered. Pots are packed before they are fully cooled. Children are lifted into wagons. Men tighten chains and check wheels. Women tie cloth around jars to stop them knocking together. You help fasten the wagon cover while snow stings your cheeks. The captain orders the strongest wagons to lead. Weaker teams will travel in the middle where help can reach them. 2 riders go ahead to mark the route with branches. Another remains behind to make sure no family is separated. The first wagon groans into motion. Its wheels break through the thin crust with a slow grinding sound. Oxen lean into their yokes, muscles shifting beneath damp hides. The second wagon follows, then the third. When your turn comes, the animals hesitate. You speak softly to them. The driver flicks the reins, not striking, only signalling. The wagon shudders, then rolls forward over the hidden trail. Every mile now costs more effort than it did yesterday. Snow clings to the wheel rims. Mud gathers beneath it. The oxen slip on frozen ground, recover, and continue. You walk beside them because riding adds weight. Cold enters through your boots and settles around your toes. The landscape appears empty, yet small signs guide you. A broken stalk shows where another wheel passed. Dark marks beneath the snow reveal old manure. The leading men leave branches upright at uncertain turns. By afternoon, the clouds begin gathering again. No one mentions them. You keep moving toward the thin dark line of trees, measuring the distance with your eyes and discovering that distant timber has a cruel habit of remaining distant. Still, the line grows slowly clearer. You can make out trunks, then separate branches, then the shadow of lower ground. The valley is real. That knowledge passes backward through the wagon train, and tired faces briefly brighten. Shelter has not yet been found. The snow has not stopped. Evening is coming quickly. But the decision has carried you somewhere better than the open plain. You follow the descending trail as the first trees rise around you, their branches whispering beneath fresh snow, and the wind begins to lose its grip. The trees close around you slowly, not as a thick forest, but as scattered cottonwoods and willows lining the river's dark course. Their trunks lean at odd angles above the bank, and their bare branches hold small ridges of snow. The wind still moves overhead, but down here it arrives weakened, broken into soft breaths and restless murmurs. You feel the difference immediately. Your face no longer stings. The wagon canvas stops snapping. Even the oxen seem to understand that this low ground offers something useful, because they lower their heads and pull with steadier steps. Yet finding trees is not the same as finding safety. The river valley contains water, fuel, and shelter, but it also contains mud, hidden channels, falling branches, and ground that may flood when the weather changes. A beautiful campsite can become a freezing pond after one night of rain or sudden thaw. Nature enjoys offering solutions with complicated terms and conditions. The leading wagons stop near a bend in the river. You walk forward with the others to inspect the place. Snow covers a broad patch of level ground between the trees. The river moves slowly beside it, dark as iron beneath shelves of new ice. On the far bank, a steep rise blocks some of the northern wind. At first glance, it looks almost perfect. Then Mr. Bell pushes his walking stick through the snow and finds wet sand beneath. He shakes his head. The ground is too low. If the river rises, the wagons may be trapped. The captain sends small groups in several directions. You join one moving upstream. Your boots crunch through snow, then sink into damp leaves. Every few steps, a branch releases its burden with a whisper, dropping powder onto your shoulders. The smell of wet bark, river water, and old vegetation surrounds you. You begin looking at the landscape differently. A large cottonwood is no longer merely a tree. It is fuel, beams, poles, bark, shade, and perhaps danger if its limbs are rotten. A slope is not simply a slope. It is protection from wind unless snow gathers above it and slides down. A clearing is not simply open ground. It is space for wagons, animals, fires, and movement, unless the soil is marshy. On the overland trails, camps are often selected near water and grass, because livestock need both in enormous quantities. A working ox may require many pounds of forage each day, and a wagon company with dozens of animals can strip a campsite quickly. Emigrants therefore learn to judge not only what a place offers now, but what it may still offer after everyone has used it. That becomes harder under snow. Grass lies hidden beneath the white surface. You scrape with your boot and uncover flattened yellow stems, but there is not much. The animals may feed here for a day or two, perhaps longer if men cut branches or lead them to exposed slopes. Farther upstream, you discover an abandoned structure. It is hardly a cabin. 3 low walls remain, made from rough logs chinked with dried mud. The roof has partly collapsed and snow has drifted through the opening. A blackened circle on the floor shows where someone once kept a fire. You stand quietly at the entrance. Who built it? A trapper, perhaps, a trading party, another emigrant company delayed by weather. There are no names carved into the logs, only shallow cuts and smoke stains. One wall holds a row of wooden pegs. On the ground lies a broken spoon. The spoon is a strange little object, worn smooth at the handle and split through the bowl. It has no value now, yet it makes the place feel inhabited. Someone sat here and ate from it. Someone listened to this same river and watched winter gather against these same trees. A fringe belief passed among some travellers claims that abandoned shelters carry the luck of their previous occupants, good or bad. A few emigrants hesitate to sleep in cabins where strangers may have died, while others consider such superstition an expensive luxury and move in before anyone else can object. You're not certain what you believe. You only know that 3 standing walls are better than none. The group calls the others forward. Soon the entire company gathers around the ruin, discussing whether it can serve as the centre of a winter camp. The captain measures the clearing by pacing it. Wagons can form a rough arc around the cabin. The river lies close enough for water, but far enough below to reduce the immediate risk of flooding. The slope to the north gives protection. Timber is plentiful, though much of it is green and difficult to burn. A few families want to continue farther into the valley. They argue that a better site may lie beyond the bend. Others point out that daylight is fading and the snowfall is thickening again. Historians remain divided over how often emigrants deliberately prepared long-term winter camps, rather than being forced into them after roads, rivers, or mountain passes became unusable. Written diaries frequently describe decisions made one day at a time, which suggests that many camps became permanent almost by accident. That is how your own decision begins. You do not announce that this will be home for the winter. You say only that you will stay tonight. Everyone understands what this may mean. The wagons move into position. Stronger teams pull onto the higher ground first. The remaining wagons follow, arranged with their open sides turned away from the prevailing wind. The old cabin stands near the centre, where it can become a storehouse, kitchen, sick room, or gathering place. Children are given the task of collecting small branches. They hurry among the trees, their earlier fear briefly replaced by the excitement of useful work. Their arms fill with twigs, curled bark, and brittle stems. One boy returns proudly carrying a branch far too large for him, dragging it behind like a captured beast. Adults begin harder labour. Men test trees for dead wood. Women clear snow from the cabin floor using boards, pans, and anything else that can serve as a shovel. Wet leaves are scraped aside. The broken roof is examined. Canvas can be stretched across the gap for the night, but a stronger covering will be needed soon. You help remove a fallen log from the doorway. Its bark feels soaked and icy beneath your gloves. 3 people lift together, boots sliding in the mud. The log rolls aside with a heavy thud, releasing the smell of decay and cold earth. Inside, the air is still. You can hear the river, the distant calls of drivers, and the steady chop of axes outside. Snow filters through the broken roof in tiny grains that catch the fading light. A fire is built in the old hearth. At first it produces more smoke than heat. Damp twigs hiss. Bark curls black at the edges. Someone kneels close and blows until sparks brighten beneath the wood. Smoke gathers under the roof, searches for an opening and finally escapes through the broken section. Then a flame rises. It is small, but everyone pauses to look at it. The fire changes the cabin at once. The walls glow amber. Frost begins melting from the lower logs. The broken spoon shines faintly where it lies near the doorway. Outside, the wagons settle into their rough circle. Animals are unyoked and led toward a patch of exposed grass. Ropes are tied between trees. Bells are fastened to the strongest oxen so they can be found if snow hides their tracks. Supper is prepared quickly. There is no time for careful cooking, only hot water, cornmeal, and a little bacon. Steam rises from bowls. You eat standing beside the fire, feeling warmth return painfully to your hands. Darkness fills the valley before the work is finished. Lanterns move among the wagons like small drifting stars. Axes fall silent one by one. The river continues beneath its thin ice, making low cracking sounds along the bank. You climb into the wagon and pull the blankets around you. The shelter is temporary. The roof leaks cold air. The wheels are packed with snow. Beyond the canvas, people are still coughing, whispering, and checking ropes. Yet the wind no longer reaches you with its full strength. For tonight, the valley holds you. Tomorrow, canvas, logs, mud, blankets, and patient hands must turn this uncertain camp into something closer to a home. Morning enters the valley as a pale glow behind the trees, and you wake beneath canvas stiffened by frost. During the night, your breath has gathered along the inside of the wagon cover in tiny beads. When the first sunlight touches them, they loosen and fall onto the blankets with soft, icy taps. It is not rain, though it feels personal. You sit up carefully, trying not to disturb the sleeping children pressed beside you. Every inch of the wagon now serves several purposes. A flour sack becomes a pillow. A wooden chest becomes a seat. A folded quilt fills a gap where cold air slips beneath the canvas. Nothing is placed casually anymore. Outside, the camp is already moving. Axes strike wood with slow, measured blows. A kettle lid rattles over the central fire. Oxen shuffle near the river, and someone calls sharply when one animal wanders toward thin ice. Smoke lies among the trees in a blue haze, carrying the smell of damp cottonwood, bacon grease, and wet wool. The company agreed to remain only for one night. No one repeats that promise this morning. Instead, people begin studying their wagons as if seeing them for the first time. These vehicles were built to carry families across open country, not to become houses through months of snow. Their canvas covers keep off ordinary rain and sun, but they do little against steady wind and bitter cold. You run your hand along the inside wall. The canvas feels thin enough to be an insult. Covered wagons used by many emigrants are usually smaller and lighter than the enormous freight wagons often shown in popular imagination. A family wagon commonly carries food, tools, bedding, and household goods, while most travellers walk beside it to spare the animals. Now that the wagon must shelter people rather than merely possessions, every weakness becomes obvious. The first task is to stop the wind. You crawl beneath the wagon and push folded cloth into the open spaces around the floorboards. Mud is gathered from the riverbank, mixed with dry grass, and pressed into cracks where wood has shrunk. It clings poorly at first, falling onto your sleeves and boots, but after repeated packing it forms a rough seal. Your fingers become numb inside your gloves. Mrs. Reed shows you how to warm them without holding them too close to the flames. She tells you to place them beneath your arms and wait for the ache to pass. It is not a graceful pose, but grace has already been abandoned beside the polished serving dish. Along the wagon's outer edge, men pile brush and logs to create a low barrier. Women hang spare blankets against the inner walls. One quilt has been carefully pieced from old dresses, and its faded squares still show small flowers, checks, and stripes from another life. You hesitate before using it as insulation. The quilt carries family history. A blue square came from a sister's dress. A brown strip once belonged to your father's work shirt. Yet sentiment cannot warm anyone while folded inside a chest. You fasten it to the canvas. The colour changes the wagon at once. The interior becomes softer, almost domestic. For a moment you can imagine that the narrow space is a tiny room rather than a box balanced on frozen wheels. Throughout the camp, wagons are altered in different ways. One family stretches a second layer of canvas over the first, leaving a narrow pocket of air between them. Another packs straw around the lower frame. Several people attach hides to the side facing north. The smell is strong, particularly when the hides begin warming near the fire, but no one complains for long. A curious bit of trail ingenuity involves using newspapers as insulation. Pages may be tucked beneath clothing, placed inside boots, or pasted against thin walls. The news itself soon becomes less important than the paper. A political speech that once inspired outrage can now keep your toes from freezing, which may be its finest public service. You find several old pages in a chest. The print has blurred from dampness, but they remain usable. You press them between the canvas and the hanging quilt. A headline about distant elections disappears beneath a patch of cloth. Whatever happened in that contest now matters far less than the wind entering near your shoulder. At the front of the wagon, the opening presents another problem. The canvas flap must still be moved aside for air, light, and access, yet every time it opens, warmth escapes. A second blanket is hung inside as a curtain. It creates a narrow entrance where snow can be shaken from clothing before anyone crawls farther in. The children treat this arrangement as a grand improvement. They call it the front room. You allow the name to stand. The wagon floor is raised above the frozen ground, which helps, but cold rises through every board. Pine boughs would make useful bedding, though there are few pines nearby. Instead, dry grass is cut from exposed slopes and spread beneath blankets. Old sacks are laid over it to prevent stems from scratching through. The result is uneven and lumpy. It is also warmer. Debate continues among researchers about how effectively emigrant families adapted wagons for extended winter shelter, since diary descriptions often focus on weather, illness, and food rather than the exact arrangement of bedding and walls. Surviving accounts suggest remarkable improvisation, but each camp uses whatever materials happen to be available. In your valley, the available materials are mud, grass, wood, canvas, hides, quilts, rope, and patience. Patience may be the scarcest. By midday, the camp looks less like a halted wagon train and more like a rough village. Brush walls stand between several wagons. The ruined cabin has received a temporary roof made from poles and overlapping canvas. A trench is dug around one side to guide melting snow away from the floor. The captain orders every family to leave space between fires and wagon covers. Canvas catches flame easily, and sparks travel farther than people expect. This is one of the cruel contradictions of cold weather. You need fire close enough to warm you, but not so close that it destroys the only shelter you possess. A small stove is installed inside one wagon belonging to a family that refused to discard it earlier. The pipe is guided through a metal plate near the rear opening. Everyone studies the arrangement with envy and suspicion. The stove produces glorious heat. It also fills the wagon with smoke when the wind changes. Its owner emerges coughing, eyes watering, and announces that the design requires improvement. This is received with gentle laughter, because a failed luxury remains entertaining when it belongs to someone else. Your own family chooses not to risk an indoor fire. Instead, heated stones are carried from the main hearth and wrapped in cloth. You place them near the foot of the bedding. Their warmth spreads slowly through the blankets, soothing at first, then fading long before dawn. The stones must be inspected carefully. since some damp rocks may crack when heated. One traveller claims that a stone once burst beside his uncle and sent fragments through a cooking pot. No one knows whether the tale is true, but it is repeated often enough to ensure that every rock in camp receives a suspicious examination. As afternoon passes, the sky darkens again. You climb onto the wagon tongue to tighten the outer canvas. From there, you can see the entire settlement. Smoke rises from several fires. Children carry bundles of grass. Men drag logs through the snow. Women kneel beside wagon wheels, fastening cloth and hides into place. There is no architect. There is no single design. Each family builds according to need, skill, and whatever happens to remain in the wagon after months on the trail. Your hands work the rope until the knot holds. You pull the canvas taut and listen as the wind presses against it. The cover bends inward but does not snap wildly as it did yesterday. That small change feels like victory. Night returns early. You crawl through the blanket curtain and settle into the altered space. The hanging quilt softens the sound of the wind. Grass beneath the bedding reduces the cold from the floor. Newspaper blocks the narrow gap near your shoulder. The wagon is still cramped. The air smells of damp wool, leather, and too many people breathing in one place. A child's knee rests against your back. Someone's boot occupies the only clear corner. Yet when snow begins brushing softly against the canvas, you no longer feel entirely exposed. The wagon has not become comfortable, it has become survivable. Outside, axes continue in the darkness, because shelter alone will not carry you through winter. Every wall, curtain, and blanket depends upon the warmth of a fire, and the valley's supply of dry wood is already beginning to look smaller. The axes begin before sunrise. You hear them through the canvas while darkness still fills the valley, each blow landing with a dull wooden thud, followed by the faint crack of fibres giving way. Somewhere close by, a saw moves back and forth with a dry rasping rhythm. The sounds are steady enough to become almost soothing, though they carry an urgent message. The camp is hungry for wood. Every family needs fuel for cooking, warming water, drying clothes, heating stones, and keeping frost from settling too deeply into tired bodies. One small fire may look modest, but fed through an entire day and night, it consumes a surprising amount. Multiply that by many wagons, and the nearby dead branches begin vanishing almost at once. You crawl from the wagon and pull your coat tightly around you. The air smells of smoke and cold bark. Frost coats the wagon wheels. Beside the central fire, several people hold tin cups near the flames, turning them slowly so the ice inside can melt. No one wastes heat now. A kettle sits above every useful patch of fire, and damp socks hang from sticks at the edge, releasing a warm wool smell that is not entirely pleasant. Mr. Bell hands you an axe. Its handle is smooth from years of use, and the iron head feels impossibly cold even through your glove. He points toward a stand of cottonwoods farther upstream, where dead limbs remain tangled among living branches. You join a small gathering moving into the trees. Snow creaks beneath your boots. The river murmurs through gaps in the ice. Above you, bare limbs rub together in the wind with a low groaning sound, as if the forest itself would prefer to remain asleep. Finding fuel requires judgment. Green wood is heavy with moisture. It burns reluctantly, producing smoke, hissing sap, and little immediate heat. Dead wood burns more readily, but fallen branches may be soaked beneath snow or rotting against the ground. Standing dead trees can provide better fuel, though cutting them is dangerous when frozen branches hang overhead. The first branch you collect looks dry. When split, its centre is dark and damp. You carry it anyway. On the overland trails, travellers often burn buffalo chips where timber is scarce. Dried dung from bison or cattle can produce a steady, nearly smokeless flame, though its warmth is limited, and the smell becomes less noticeable only after everyone agrees not to discuss it. In open country, such fuel can make the difference between hot food and a cold supper. Here in the valley, snow has buried most of those useful little treasures. The children are sent to search beneath trees and along exposed banks. They return with twigs, bark, and handfuls of dry grass. Even the smallest bundle matters. Nothing combustible is ignored unless it appears likely to poison, explode, or summon an especially annoyed animal. You swing the axe into a fallen limb. The first blow glances aside, the second bites shallowly. By the 10th, your shoulders burn beneath your coat. The work warms you better than the fire, though the warmth comes mixed with sweat, which can become dangerous once you stop moving. Mrs. Reed has warned everyone to open collars while working and close them again before resting. Sweat trapped against the skin cools quickly. You understand this when you pause and feel cold gather beneath your shirt. The branch finally splits with a sharp crack. You kneel to cut it into pieces short enough for the hearth. Chips scatter across the snow, bright and clean against the white surface. Their fresh scent rises immediately, sweet and earthy. Back at camp, the wood is sorted. The driest pieces are kept beneath the cabin roof for cooking and emergencies. Damp logs are stacked near fires to dry slowly. Brush is piled under wagons, protected from falling snow. Each family marks its own supply, though ownership becomes complicated when everyone depends on the same forest. At first, people gather whatever they can carry. Then disagreements begin. One man accuses another family of taking branches he cut earlier. A woman finds half her dry kindling missing. Two boys argue over a bundle of willow twigs until both are ordered to share it. Fuel is becoming more precious than tools, dishes, or coins. Money cannot warm a kettle when the nearest shop is hundreds of miles away. The captain calls a meeting beside the cabin. He proposes that cutting groups work together and divide wood according to household size. Families with sick members will receive extra. Those with stronger adults must contribute more labour. The plan sounds fair until people begin counting who is truly sick, who is truly strong, and how much warmth a child requires compared with an ox driver who claims to be nearly frozen every evening. Researchers continue to disagree about how often stranded emigrant groups managed fuel communally, rather than protecting private supplies within individual households. Diaries reveal both cooperation and bitter conflict, sometimes in the same camp and on the same day. Your company chooses cooperation, though not gracefully. Axes and saws are collected into a shared pool. Each morning teams travel farther into the valley. Each afternoon, the wood is measured in rough arm loads and distributed. The distance matters. Nearby fuel disappears first. Soon you walk half a mile to reach good branches, then farther still. Every log must be dragged or carried back through snow. Ropes are looped around larger pieces and two people pull while another pushes. An unusual trick uses the wagon's iron tyre as a crude sled runner. A loose wheel rim is placed beneath one end of a heavy log, reducing the drag across packed snow. It works poorly on uneven ground and beautifully on smooth stretches, which is more than can be said for many inventions. The children call it the wood train. They cheer when the log slides downhill faster than expected. The adults do not cheer, because they are running behind it. At the central hearth, fire tending becomes an art. Too much wood produces flames that waste heat into the open air. Too little allows the coals to die. Thick logs are arranged over a bed of embers, with smaller pieces tucked beneath. Ash is banked around the edges at night to preserve warmth until morning. One woman proves especially skilled at keeping coals alive. Before sleeping, she buries glowing pieces under a layer of ash. At dawn, she uncovers them and adds dry grass. A faint red glow appears, followed by smoke, then flame. This saves precious kindling. It also saves time because starting fire from flint in numb hands can test the patience of even the most peaceful soul. People begin carrying live coals between hearths in covered iron pots. A glowing ember becomes a small treasure passed carefully from one family to another. Every movement around fire requires caution. Wool skirts can catch sparks. Canvas can ignite quickly. Children are warned not to run near the hearth, then immediately run near the hearth. Pots are placed on stable stones. Water is kept nearby, though in cold weather even the emergency bucket may freeze around the edges. One evening a gust lifts sparks toward a wagon. Someone shouts. You turn and see tiny orange points landing on the canvas roof. A man strikes them away with his hat while another throws snow against the side. The sparks vanish, leaving several dark pinholes but no flame. For a long moment the camp remains silent. The incident changes the arrangement of the fires. Hearths are moved farther from the wagons. Low barriers of earth and stone are built around them. Watch duties are assigned during windy nights. Fire offers comfort, but no one forgets how easily it can become another disaster. As darkness settles, you sit beside the central blaze with your hands extended toward the heat. One side of your body warms while the other remains cold. You turn slowly, like a piece of bread being toasted with limited enthusiasm. The flames consume the day's labour in minutes. A branch that took half an hour to cut disappears in a brief rush of orange light. A heavy log settles into coals and gradually becomes ash. You watch it vanish and understand why every family studies the woodpile before sleeping. Beyond the fire, the valley lies black and still. Snow rests on the branches. Smoke drifts beneath the stars. Inside the wagons, blankets and mud hold back the wind, but only the fires make the camp feel alive. You add one carefully chosen piece of wood to the coals. It catches slowly, brightens, and sends a soft wave of warmth across your face. Tonight there is enough. Tomorrow you will walk farther to find more. By the next morning the smell of breakfast has changed. Earlier on the trail, bacon might crackle generously in a pan while coffee boiled beside it. Flour could become biscuits, pancakes, or thick dumplings, depending on patience and mood. Now the bacon is sliced so thin that light nearly passes through it, and the coffee is weaker, darker water carrying only a memory of its former confidence. You hold your tin cup between both hands and watch Mrs. Reed measure flour. She does not scoop casually. She levels each cup with the back of a knife, gathers every grain that falls onto the table, and returns it to the sack. The movement is quiet and precise. Food has become arithmetic. There are mouths to feed, animals to consider, and no reliable date for departure. The valley may hold you for weeks, it may hold you for months. A full meal today can become an empty pot later, so hunger must be managed before it becomes desperate. The families gather their supplies for another accounting. Flour remains the foundation of most wagon stores. Beans provide substance. Bacon supplies fat and salt. Cornmeal thickens soups and stretches wheat flour. Dried apples, peaches and berries offer sweetness and a little variety, though several sacks have absorbed dampness and must be inspected carefully. Travellers on the Oregon Trail commonly carry large quantities of flour because it is versatile, familiar and reasonably durable when kept dry. Yet flour sacks can tear, barrels can leak, and damp grain can spoil. A family may begin the journey believing it has prepared generously, only to discover that rivers, insects, waste and delay have quietly reduced the supply. You open one sack and find small clumps near the bottom. They smell faintly sour. The damaged flour is spread on cloth beside the fire where warmth may dry it before mould takes hold. No one throws away the clumps. They are broken apart, sifted and judged one handful at a time. The camp establishes daily portions. Adults receive a measured allowance. Children receive less, though growing bodies do not always respect careful calculations. Anyone performing hard labour may be given an extra spoonful of beans or a strip of bacon, depending on what remains. This creates immediate difficulties. Everyone believes their own work is especially exhausting. The woodcutters argue that swinging axes requires more food. The people caring for animals point out that they spend hours in the cold. Mothers quietly note that washing, cooking, nursing, repairing clothing, and soothing frightened children continue long after everyone else sits down. The captain wisely stops trying to rank suffering before someone ranks him last. Instead, each household manages its own portions within a shared estimate of how long the camp may remain trapped. Mrs. Reed writes figures on a scrap of paper. You watch her count days, then cross out the number and count again. Her lips move silently. At last she folds the paper and places it beneath a cup. You ask how long the flour will last. She says longer if no one asks that question before breakfast. The first change is simple. Meals become thinner. Bean soup contains more water. Cornmeal porridge spreads farther when cooked slowly. Bacon fat is saved after frying and stirred into later dishes. Bones are boiled until they surrender every trace of flavour. Nothing is wasted. Crumbs are gathered from boards. Grease is scraped from pans. Water used to soften dried fruit becomes part of the meal. Even the flour dust left inside a sack is shaken into a bowl. A curious camp habit develops around the empty flour bags. Once cleaned, they become towels, patches, slings, pillow covers, and even small garments for children. Some sacks carry printed company names, leaving a child to walk around camp with a mill advertisement across the back. Fashion has survived, though only in a deeply practical form. Cooking requires imagination. One morning, you mix cornmeal with warm water and a spoonful of bacon fat. The dough is shaped into small cakes and placed on a hot stone near the coals. Their edges blacken before the centres cook, but they smell comforting. You turn them with a knife. The first cake breaks apart. The second holds. The third falls into the ashes, where it remains for several seconds while everyone decides whether dignity or hunger is stronger. Hunger wins. You brush away the ash and divide the cake among the children. They eat it without complaint. Sugar is reserved for the sick and for rare moments when morale needs help. A spoonful stirred into hot water becomes a treat. Dried apples are cut into tiny pieces so that each bowl of porridge receives one sweet fragment. You find yourself chewing slowly, holding each bite longer than before. Meals that once disappeared in minutes now become deliberate ceremonies. People sit close together, warming hands around bowls and speaking less while they eat. The sound of spoons against tin seems unusually loud. Specialists continue to debate how closely surviving trail diaries reflect everyday hunger, since writers often record dramatic shortages, but say little about ordinary days of careful rationing. It is possible that many families endured not sudden starvation, but a long, quiet narrowing of portions that became normal before anyone described it as a crisis. That narrowing enters your camp gently. The children ask for seconds less often because they have learned the answer. Adults claim they are not hungry when they are. People drink more hot water before meals, hoping warmth will persuade the stomach that something substantial has happened. Coffee becomes precious. Some families roast grain, roots, or crushed seeds as substitutes. The result may be brown and warm, which is apparently enough to earn the name coffee during hardship. One man prepares a drink from toasted corn and announces that it tastes almost identical. No one agrees. Still, they drink it. A hunter leaves camp before dawn and returns after dark with a rabbit. The animal is small, but its arrival creates excitement. The meat is divided into a stew with beans, onions from one family's remaining store, and plenty of water. The smell fills the cabin. People drift toward the doorway, pretending to have unrelated business. Someone needs thread. Someone wishes to inspect the roof. Someone has suddenly remembered a question about the kettle. The stew is divided carefully. Each person receives only a little meat, yet the taste changes the entire evening. The broth carries richness. The children sit straighter. Conversation grows lighter. For several minutes, the camp feels abundant. Then the bowls are empty. Hunting cannot be trusted. Game may be scarce near a busy trail, and winter animals are difficult to find. Ammunition must also be conserved. A missed shot wastes powder and lead, and it may frighten other animals away. Gathering wild food is equally uncertain. Berries are gone. Roots are hidden beneath frozen ground. Some plants are edible, others dangerous, and winter has reduced nearly everything to brown stems beneath snow. Knowledge matters, but even knowledge cannot produce food where little grows. You begin to understand why fat is valued so highly. Lean meat may satisfy briefly, but bodies working in cold weather need energy. Bacon grease becomes almost sacred. A spoon dropped onto the ground is scraped up with the seriousness of a medical emergency. At supper, Mrs. Reed makes dumplings from flour and water. They swell in the bean broth, soft and pale. You receive 2. You cut each one into smaller pieces, not because this creates more food, but because it creates more moments of eating. Outside, snow brushes the cabin roof. Inside, steam clouds the air. Faces glow in firelight. Someone tells a story about a feast back home, describing roast chicken, pies, fresh butter, and a table so crowded that dishes overlap. Everyone groans softly. It is a cruel story. It is also strangely comforting. You remember kitchens where food arrived without calculation, where flour could spill without consequence, where a second helping required no meeting. Then you look around the cabin. The portions are small, but they have been shared. The rabbit became stew. The grease was saved. The damaged flour was rescued. No one ate alone. Survival does not look heroic tonight. It looks like a spoon scraping the bottom of a bowl, a mother pretending she's already eaten, and a child breaking one dumpling in half so another child can have some. You carry the empty pot toward the river. Tomorrow it must be filled again, though even water now demands labour beneath the tightening ice. The empty pot feels heavier on the walk to the river than it did when filled with stew. Perhaps it is the cold, or perhaps your arms have simply learned to resent every task. Snow presses beneath your boots with a soft crunch. The path slopes between cottonwoods toward the dark ribbon of water, where thin plates of ice have joined overnight along the bank. You stop before stepping closer. The river no longer looks friendly. Its open centre moves slowly black beneath the grey morning, while the edges appear solid enough to tempt a careless foot. Yet ice near flowing water may be thin, uneven, and hollow underneath. One confident step can become a freezing lesson, and nobody in camp has requested additional educational experiences. A rope is tied around your waist. Mr. Bell holds the other end while you approach the bank with a long pole. You strike the ice before each step, listening to the sound. Thick ice answers with a dull knock. Thin ice gives a sharper note and sometimes trembles beneath the pole. You kneel several feet from the water and chip at the frozen edge with an axe. Each blow sends small, white fragments skittering across the surface. Your hands ache around the handle. After several minutes, a dark opening appears. Water rises through it, carrying tiny bubbles and pieces of broken ice. You dip the pot carefully. The metal pulls hard against your wrist as the current catches it. You fill only half at first, lift it, then return for more. Spilled water freezes almost at once on the rim and handle, leaving a glassy coating. Water is essential, obvious, and strangely easy to underestimate. A person may endure reduced food for some time, but dehydration weakens the body quickly. Cold weather can hide thirst because sweat is less noticeable, and chilled air feels less drying, even while every breath releases moisture. The animals need far more than the people. Oxen drink gallons when water is available, and they cannot be expected to survive on a few polite sips from a tin cup. Horses and mules also require regular watering, though leading them onto icy banks creates another danger. The camp establishes separate watering places. One opening is kept for people, another farther downstream is widened for livestock. This reduces mud, manure, and the chance that an ox will place one enormous hoof through the family drinking hole. Keeping the openings clear becomes daily work. Each night ice forms again. Each morning someone must break it. The edges thicken, and the hole narrows beneath a skin of white. Tools are left nearby, though iron handles become painfully cold and may stick to wet gloves. A boy learns this after touching a metal cup with damp fingers. He pulls away too quickly and loses a little skin, then looks offended, as though the cup has betrayed a private agreement. Mrs. Reed warms his hand gently and explains that cold metal has no manners. The pots return to camp one careful step at a time. A fool would waste the water and soak your clothing. Wet garments in freezing weather can drain warmth rapidly, so you walk with your knees slightly bent, watching every patch of polished ice. Inside the cabin, river water is boiled when fuel allows. Boiling helps reduce the danger from many invisible illnesses, though emigrants do not yet understand every detail of microbes and contamination. They often recognize through experience that water near busy camps, especially below livestock or human waste, can bring sickness. That knowledge does not always prevent mistakes. People are tired, fuel is limited, clear water looks safe. A cup drawn directly from a sparkling stream can seem perfectly innocent, which is exactly the sort of confidence nature enjoys correcting. You strain cloudy water through folded cloth. The fabric catches bits of leaf, sand, and bark. Though it cannot remove everything harmful, the water then sits near the fire until it reaches a full boil. Steam fills the cabin and gathers on the cold logs, where it forms damp streaks. Every cup of safe water therefore consumes wood. That fact troubles the camp. Fuel is already scarce, and boiling large quantities requires time. Families begin deciding which water must be boiled and which risks they are willing to accept. Practitioners of overland history still dispute how consistently emigrants treated drinking water during winter camps, because written accounts often mention bad water only after illness appears. Routine habits may have seemed too ordinary to record, leaving later readers to reconstruct them from scattered clues. Snow appears to offer an easier answer. It lies everywhere, clean and white, waiting to be gathered. Children carry pans outside and return with soft heaps. The snow is packed into kettles and placed over the coals, then everyone watches it disappear. A full pot of loose snow melts into only a small amount of water. More snow must be added, then more again. The process takes fuel and patience, producing far less than the eye expects. A useful trick is to place a little liquid water in the bottom of the kettle before adding snow. Without it, snow may scorch or leave an unpleasant taste against hot metal. This sounds impossible until you smell burned snow, a fragrance with no reason to exist, and yet somehow very real. Fresh snow is gathered from clean surfaces away from the animals and fires. The top layer may contain soot, ash, or wind-blown dirt. Yellow snow receives no discussion. Everyone understands this rule without formal instruction. Children begin competing to find the cleanest drifts. They scoop from wagon covers, untouched corners near trees, and flat sections of brush. Their enthusiasm makes water gathering almost cheerful until their mittens become wet, and they must return to the fire. Melted snow tastes flat. It lacks the minerals of river water and carries faint traces of smoke from the kettle. Some people add a pinch of salt. Others mix it with weak coffee or dried fruit water to make it more appealing. The camp also learns to store water overnight. Buckets left outside freeze solid. Pots kept too close to the fire may crack, spill, or become coated with soot. Water is placed inside wagons near sleeping bodies, wrapped in cloth, or stored beneath the cabin roof where warmth from the hearth delays freezing. One family buries a covered container in dry grass and blankets. By morning, a thin layer of ice has formed, but most of the water remains liquid. The method is celebrated as if they have discovered a hidden spring. Another traveller claims that a small wooden float placed in a bucket helps keep ice from sealing the entire surface. A piece of clean bark is tried. It moves whenever the water shifts, and ice forms around it rather than in one solid sheet. Whether this saves much effort is uncertain. It gives everyone something new to argue about, which may be equally valuable during a long winter. Bathing becomes rare and strategic. Hands and faces are washed when possible. Cloths are warmed near the fire. Full washing is avoided unless enough heat exists to dry skin and hair quickly. Cleanliness remains important, but so does not becoming an icicle in the name of good manners. Laundry creates another challenge. Clothing washed in river water freezes stiff if hung outside. Shirts and stockings stand upright on lines shaped by the wind. They must be carried indoors and thawed near the fire, filling the cabin with dampness. The sight produces quiet amusement. A frozen pair of trousers can be leaned against a wall without folding, an impressive achievement for any garment. By afternoon, you make another trip to the river. The sky has cleared and sunlight shines across the ice with painful brightness. The livestock opening is crowded with hoof prints. Men lead oxen forward one at a time, preventing them from pushing and sliding. One animal refuses to drink. It sniffs the water, steps backward, and shakes its head. Perhaps the ice frightens it. Perhaps the water smells strange. Perhaps the ox has simply chosen today to become philosophical. You wet your hand and touch the animal's muzzle. Then you lead it closer again. At last it lowers its head and drinks, breaking the reflection of the sky into dark ripples. Steam rises faintly around its face. The other animals shift behind it, bells sounding softly. You wait until each has finished. The process takes most of the afternoon. When you finally carry the last pot uphill, your shoulders ache and your gloves are crusted with ice. Inside the cabin, Mrs. Reed pours some water into the bean pot, some into cups, and a little into a basin for the sick. Nothing remains unassigned. Outside, the river continues moving beneath its growing roof of ice. Snow keeps falling, offering water in a form that must be gathered, melted, guarded, and carried. You drink slowly. The cup warms your fingers. The water tastes faintly of smoke and iron, but it soothes the dryness in your throat. Around you, every living thing in the valley depends upon the same dark current beneath the ice. And tomorrow morning, before breakfast, the opening must be broken again. By evening, the cold has found every weak place in your clothing. It enters through the worn seam beneath your arm, slips around the loose edge of your collar, and settles inside your boots where the leather has begun to crack. You can stand beside the fire until your cheeks glow. Yet the moment you turn away, the warmth seems to fall from you like water. Clothing is no longer a matter of appearance. It is shelter carried on the body. You begin with the layers closest to your skin. A linen or cotton shirt feels comfortable when dry, but once damp with sweat, it becomes cold quickly. Wool performs better because it can retain some warmth even when moist. Families who packed wool shirts, stockings, shawls, caps, and blankets now understand the value of every scratchy thread. Wool is rarely gentle. It rubs the neck, catches against rough skin, and somehow finds exactly the place where you're already irritated. Still, no one complains much about itching when the alternative is shivering. You pull on 2 pairs of stockings. The first pair is thin and worn at the heels. The second is thicker but patched at the toes. Over them come boots that once fit comfortably and now feel tight. This creates a new problem. Too many layers inside a boot can restrict circulation, making the foot colder rather than warmer. Mrs. Reed notices you forcing your heel downward and tells you to stop. She removes 1 pair of stockings, wraps your foot loosely in a strip of wool, and checks that your toes can still move. The lesson is simple. Warmth requires space for blood to flow. Many 19th century emigrants rely on practical garments rather than specialised winter equipment. Men commonly wear wool trousers, shirts, waistcoats, coats, hats, and boots. Women layer shifts, petticoats, dresses, shawls, cloaks, stockings, and bonnets. Children wear smaller versions made from whatever can be sewn, altered, inherited, or cut down. The official wardrobe sounds respectable. The actual camp wardrobe soon becomes wonderfully confused. A boy wears his father's old waistcoat over 2 shirts. A woman ties a man's wool scarf around her bonnet. One elderly traveller wraps a faded tablecloth around his shoulders and insists it is nearly as fine as a cape. No one disagrees. The tablecloth is thick. Every household begins sewing. Needles pass through wool beside the fire. Thread is drawn from spools kept dry inside boxes. Torn cuffs are turned inward. Worn elbows receive patches cut from clothing beyond repair. The smallest scraps are saved for filling holes in mittens or lining the soles of boots. You sit with a stocking stretched across your hand. A hole is opened beneath the heel and the skin below is already rubbed raw. You weave thread across the gap, then stitch through it until a small net forms. The repair is uneven, but it will hold. A strange little practice emerges when people place smooth stones or dried corn inside stockings while mending them. The rounded shape spreads the fabric and makes the hole easier to see. Proper darning eggs exist, but no one packed enough of those, perhaps because nobody imagined that a river stone would one day become a respected sewing tool. Newspapers appear again. Pages are folded and placed beneath shirts, inside coats, and around the feet. Paper traps a little air and blocks wind surprisingly well. It also crackles whenever you move. The camp sounds as though everyone is secretly carrying letters under their clothes. One man stuffs so many pages inside his coat that he cannot bend easily. When he sits, a report about a railway proposal tears loudly across his chest. The children laugh. He removes one page and declares the adjustment complete. Animal hides provide another barrier against wind. Deer hide, buffalo robes, and sheepskin can be worn over the shoulders or laid across the knees. Fur turned inward holds warmth close to the body. Yet hides become heavy when wet and stiff when frozen, so they must be dried slowly near the fire. Too close, and they scorch. Too far, and they remain damp. Everything in winter requires the precise distance between useless and disastrous. Footwear causes the greatest worry. Boots have endured months of stones, mud, river water, and wagon travel. Soles separate from uppers. Stitching breaks, leather hardens. A small opening that admitted dust in summer now admits snow, water, and cold. Men repair soles with wooden pegs, scraps of leather, and heavy thread. Grease is worked into the surface to resist moisture. Bacon fat may be used when nothing better remains, though dogs become extremely interested in footwear treated this way. One morning, a child wakes to find a dog licking his boot with deep concentration. The boot survives. The child is less certain about its dignity. Where leather cannot be repaired, cloth is wrapped around the foot and tied at the ankle. Moccasins may be made or traded for when suitable materials and knowledge are available. Some emigrants learn techniques from native people or experienced frontier travellers, though poorly made footwear can wear through rapidly on rough ground. Authorities continue to examine how much clothing knowledge moved between emigrant groups, indigenous communities, trappers, and trading posts. Written records often credit the person who recorded an idea rather than the person who first taught it, leaving many practical exchanges only partly visible. You see such exchanges in small gestures. Mr. Bell shows a younger man how to wrap a strip of wool around the foot without creating folds that cause blisters. A woman who grew up farther north demonstrates how to fasten a shawl across the chest so the wind cannot lift it. Another traveller cuts fur into narrow pieces and lines the edges of a child's hood. No one calls these lessons heroic. They save warmth all the same. Clothing must also remain dry. Each evening, garments are inspected near the fire. Snow is brushed away before it melts. Damp stockings are changed when spares exist. Coats are hung where smoke and warmth can reach them, but sparks cannot. The cabin fills with lines of clothing. Sleeves dangle overhead. Stockings hang like small dark flags. Mittens sway whenever someone opens the door. The air smells of wool, leather, smoke, sweat, and river damp. It is not pleasant, it is familiar. The children dislike wearing layers at night. They wriggle beneath blankets and complain that stockings twist around their toes. Adults insist they keep at least one dry layer close, because getting dressed in a freezing wagon before dawn can consume both time and courage. You sleep wearing your shirt, stockings, and cap. The cap feels absurd at first, then the temperature falls, and absurdity becomes wisdom. Heat escapes readily from any uncovered part of the body, and a warm head covering improves comfort even if old claims about losing most body heat through the head are greatly exaggerated. In the camp, no one measures percentages. They simply notice that a cap helps. Your breath clouds the air inside the wagon. The children lie between adults, surrounded by quilts and wool blankets. Heated stones rest near their feet. One stone has cooled, so you push it aside and tuck the blanket more tightly beneath them. Outside, the wind moves through the trees. It presses against the wagon wall, but the quilt lining holds. Snow brushes the canvas with a faint dry sound. Somewhere near the cabin, a door opens and closes. Someone coughs. Someone adds wood to the fire. You flex your toes inside the wrapped wool. They are not warm exactly, but you can feel them. That is enough. Before sleep, you look at the clothing hanging from pegs and ropes. Every garment carries evidence of the journey. Mud stains remain near hems. Sleeves have faded in the sun. Patches overlap older patches. Buttons no longer match. The camp has little interest in elegance now. A dress becomes insulation. A shawl becomes a curtain. A flour sack becomes a child's undershirt. A newspaper becomes a lining for boots. Winter strips clothing of social display and reveals its oldest purpose, to place one more barrier between fragile skin and the night air. You pull the blanket beneath your chin and listen to the soft rustle of paper inside your coat. Tomorrow, the children will need warmer mittens, the ox drivers will need dry socks, and someone must repair the split boot by the fire. For now, every seam holds. Morning arrives with a child whispering that the water cup has frozen beside the bedding. You open your eyes and see a thin circle of ice shining inside the tin. The wagon remains dim, lined with quilts and shadow. 3 children lie folded together beneath the blankets, their knees tucked close, their hair untidy from sleep. For a few quiet seconds, no one moves. Then the youngest asks whether breakfast is ready. Cold may alter the landscape, delay the journey, and threaten every supply. But it does not prevent children from waking hungry. You sit up, pull on your boots, and help them dress one layer at a time. Stockings must be checked for dampness. Mittens must be found beneath blankets. Scarves are wrapped carefully, leaving enough space to breathe. One child has somehow lost a shoe inside a wagon barely large enough to turn around in. The search becomes a family event. The shoe is finally discovered beneath the flour chest, resting beside a wooden spoon and half a button. Nobody knows how it travelled there. The child accepts no responsibility, which is a tradition far older than the Oregon Trail. Outside, the camp glows faintly beneath fresh snow. Children emerge from wagons in mismatched layers, looking round and padded. Their clothes carry patches of every colour. Some wear caps pulled low over their ears. Others have scarves tied around their faces so that only their eyes remain visible. At first, the snow delights them. They drag their boots through it, make small piles, and throw handfuls at one another until an adult reminds them that wet mittens do not dry by magic. Their excitement is useful. It turns a dangerous landscape into something briefly playful. Yet children in a winter camp cannot simply play all day. They carry water in small cups, collect twigs, brush snow from wagon steps, gather dry grass, hold lamps, watch younger siblings, and help prepare meals. Even a child of 6 may perform tasks that matter to the household. This is an ordinary feature of 19th century family life. Children commonly contribute labour at home, on farms and during migration. The work varies by age and strength, but childhood is not separated from family survival as clearly as it often is in later generations. You give the older children cloth sacks and send them to collect bark from fallen branches. They are told to remain within sight of the wagons. They agree solemnly. Within minutes, they are beyond the nearest tree. You call them back and explain again that snow can hide holes, streams, and familiar paths. A child may wander only a short distance and still lose sight of camp when the wind rises. To make the boundary clearer, strips of cloth are tied to branches around the safe area. The children call them flags. Adults call them markers. One boy declares that the camp is now a kingdom and immediately appoints himself governor. His authority lasts until he is told to carry kindling. Inside the cabin, a corner is set aside for lessons. Schooling along the trail is irregular, but many families carry books, slates, Bibles, primers, and writing materials. Parents may teach children when travel allows, especially during long stops. Winter provides time, though not always comfort. You sit near the fire with 4 children arranged on logs and boxes. One holds a slate across her knees, another traces letters in a thin layer of ash spread across a board. Paper is too valuable for careless practice, so every scrap is used sparingly. The lesson begins with reading. The youngest child sounds out simple words while the others listen. Wind moves around the cabin walls. A kettle bubbles nearby. Someone chops wood outside, each strike interrupting the sentences at regular intervals. Concentration comes and goes. A boy watches steam rising from the pot and forgets the word before him. A girl begins drawing an ox on her slate. The ox gradually gains antlers, wings, and a human hat. You ask what sort of animal it is. She says it is an Oregon bird. Education becomes flexible. Numbers are practiced by counting beans. Geography is discussed using the rough map scratched on a board. Writing exercises become letters to relatives far away, though several letters may never be sent. One child writes that the camp is very pleasant. His mother reads the sentence and raises an eyebrow. He explains that grandmother might worry otherwise. A peculiar pastime among travelling children involves collecting small objects from the trail, including unusual stones, buttons, feathers, bits of coloured glass, and discarded hardware. These treasures may be stored in bags or boxes even when adults are throwing away furniture. A bent buckle can become a coin, a badge, or part of an imaginary castle before supper. The children in your camp build a tiny town beneath the cabin table. Flat stones become houses, twigs form fences, a wooden spool serves as the church. The settlement has no snow, no hunger, and an apparently endless supply of acorn livestock. You watch them whisper over its streets. Their play copies the adult world, but improves it. Disputes are settled quickly. Food is shared. Every house has a roof. Nobody argues about the condition of the river. Researchers have not reached agreement on how deeply children understood the danger surrounding overland winter camps. Diaries written by adults often present them as cheerful, frightened, helpful, or troublesome, according to the writer's mood. Children's own surviving voices are fewer, leaving much of their inner experience hidden. You see hints of it at night. A child who laughs during the day asks whether the snow will bury the wagon. Another wants to know what happens if the flour disappears. One dreams about wolves and wakes crying without remembering why. You answer gently. You say the wagons are strong. You say the adults are watching. You say breakfast will come in the morning. These statements are not complete guarantees, but children do not need a lecture on uncertainty while lying in the dark. They need a voice that remains calm. Illness moves quickly among them. Close quarters, damp clothing, smoke, weak diets, and cold air create constant trouble. Coughs pass from wagon to wagon. Noses run, throats become sore. A fever in one child can change the entire rhythm of a household. When the youngest girl begins shivering despite warm blankets, Mrs. Reed touches her forehead and frowns. The child is moved nearer the cabin fire. Her coat is loosened. Warm water is offered in small amounts. A cloth is placed across her brow. Adults watch her breathing while pretending not to watch too closely. Other children are instructed to remain quiet. This produces the loudest whispering the camp has yet heard. They sit nearby, making paper shapes from old newspaper. One folds a small boat. Another creates something that might be a bird or perhaps a damaged hat. They place the objects beside the sick child as gifts. By afternoon, her fever eases slightly. The relief spreads through the cabin without celebration. Shoulders lower, voices soften. Someone adds a little sugar to her water using part of the supply reserved for illness. The children notice. They do not ask for any. As darkness gathers, chores continue. Older children carry bowls. Younger ones sort beans from small stones. A girl rocks a baby while her mother repairs a coat. 2 boys help turn damp stockings near the hearth. Stories begin after supper. An older man tells of a clever rabbit who escapes a hungry fox. A woman sings a hymn in a low voice. Someone recalls a ridiculous rooster that once attacked a minister during Sunday worship. The children laugh so loudly that the storyteller must pause. For a little while, the cabin feels less like a refuge and more like a crowded family room. The firelight softens the rough logs. Shadows sway overhead. Outside, winter holds the valley in darkness, but inside, the children repeat the final line of the rabbit story until everyone knows it. One by one, they grow sleepy. You carry the youngest back to the wagon, wrapped in a quilt. Her head rests against your shoulder. She smells of smoke, wool, and the faint sweetness of sugar water. You place her between the others and tuck blankets beneath their feet. Tomorrow they will gather bark, practice letters, lose mittens, complain about porridge, and invent another kingdom beneath the table. Their fear will return in small questions. So will their laughter. And while the adults measure flour, wood, water, and distance, the children quietly measure winter in stories, chores, games, and the number of nights until the trail appears again. The child's breathing remains steady through the night, and by morning her forehead feels cooler beneath your palm. Relief comes quietly. There is no cheer, no grand announcement, only Mrs. Reed closing her eyes for a moment before reaching for the kettle. She has slept perhaps an hour, yet the fire must be stirred, water warmed, breakfast measured, and damp bedding carried outside before it grows sour. Winter does not pause because one person is tired. Across the camp, women rise into the same relentless rhythm. You see them stepping from wagons with shawls drawn close, moving carefully over frozen ground while the sky is still dark. One carries a crying baby against her shoulder. Another balances a water pot in one hand and a bundle of clothing in the other. A third kneels beside a fire that has nearly died, uncovering the last red coals beneath the ash. Their work begins before most people notice it. Water must be fetched or melted. Food must be prepared from shrinking supplies. Children must be dressed, watched, comforted, taught and corrected. Clothing must be patched. Blankets must be dried. Sick people must be cleaned and fed. Fires must be tended. Supplies must be counted again and again. Much of this labour leaves no dramatic mark in a trail diary. A broken axle earns a full page. A river crossing becomes a story repeated for years. The quiet work of keeping 6 people fed, clothed and reasonably clean may receive only a few words, even though survival depends upon it every day. Women travelling west in the 19th century often carry enormous domestic responsibilities, while also walking beside wagons, driving animals, gathering fuel, nursing the ill and helping with emergencies. Their labour is not separate from the journey. It is one of the forces that makes the journey possible. You watch Mrs. Reed divide the morning tasks. She does not hold an official title. No vote has named her leader. Yet when she speaks, people listen because she remembers who has fever, which child needs dry stockings, how much salt remains, and which family has not eaten properly since yesterday. Authority in the camp grows from usefulness. A man may give a loud speech about courage, but the person who knows where the clean cloth is kept receives more immediate respect. Breakfast is thin porridge. Mrs. Reed stirs the pot while another woman cuts dried apple into tiny pieces. Each fragment is dropped into a bowl for a child. The adults receive none. You notice that Mrs. Reed serves everyone before herself. When the pot is nearly empty, she scrapes what remains into her own cup. It is hardly more than a few spoonfuls. You ask whether she has eaten. She says she tasted the porridge while cooking. This is technically true and nutritionally unconvincing. Women in the camp begin watching one another for this habit. A mother who repeatedly gives away her portion may weaken without admitting it. Quiet agreements form. Someone places an extra dumpling in her bowl. Someone claims a child has left half a biscuit when the child has done nothing of the sort. Care is sometimes disguised as accident to protect pride. After breakfast, laundry begins. Water is precious, fuel is limited, and cloth freezes rapidly, so washing becomes selective. The most soiled garments are cleaned first. Baby cloths cannot wait. Neither can bandages or anything used around sickness. You carry a basin near the fire. Soap has become scarce. What remains is cut into small pieces and softened in hot water. Grease and wood ash may be combined to make crude soap, though the mixture can irritate skin when prepared badly. A curious household trick involves using clean snow to rub dirt from wool before the garment becomes soaked. The cloth is laid on fresh powder and pressed gently, allowing the snow to lift some grime. It does not produce perfect cleanliness, but perfection left camp several hundred miles ago. You rub a wool shawl against the snow. The powder turns grey. The shawl smells fresher afterward, though it also smells strongly of smoke, as everything does now. Even the children's hair carries the scent of the hearth. If winter had a perfume, it would be wet wool, bacon grease, ash, and determination. Near the cabin, two women inspect the food stores. They turn sacks, check for dampness, and search for signs of insects or mice. A small tear in a flour bag is sewn shut immediately. Beans scattered beneath a chest are gathered one by one. One woman keeps a written inventory. Another distrusts paper and counts by memory. They compare totals and discover that one bacon bundle is missing. For several uneasy minutes, suspicion enters the room. Then the bundle is found beneath a folded hide, where someone placed it to keep it cool and forgot to mention it. The relief is mixed with irritation. Forgetfulness is becoming another winter hazard. Medical care also rests largely in women's hands. Few wagon companies travel with trained physicians. Families rely upon experience, home remedies, guidebooks, shared knowledge, and whatever medicines remain in their chests. Women commonly act as nurses, midwives, and practical healers, making decisions with limited tools and uncertain information. Mrs. Reed examines cracked skin on a boy's hands. She cleans the cuts, warms a little grease, and covers them with soft cloth. Another woman prepares willow bark tea for pain. Someone else recommends an onion poultice for a cough. The cabin contains enough remedies to frighten both illness and patient. Some treatments help, others merely offer warmth, attention, and hope. Researchers continue to question how much healing knowledge among emigrant women came from family tradition, printed medical manuals, indigenous practice, or exchange with other travellers. The evidence is scattered, and many useful methods pass through conversation without ever being credited in writing. You witness that exchange beside the fire. A woman from Illinois shows another how to warm a chilled infant gradually rather than placing the child too near intense heat. An older traveller explains how to recognise dangerous swelling around frost-damaged skin. A younger mother learns to check for dehydration by watching a sick child's mouth and alertness. No formal lesson is announced. Knowledge moves from hand to hand while kettles boil. The camp also depends upon emotional steadiness. Fear spreads quickly in close quarters. Children listen when adults whisper about food. Tired people misread ordinary sounds. A cracking branch becomes a falling tree. A distant animal cry becomes wolves circling the wagons. Women spend hours softening those fears without denying them entirely. They tell children what task comes next. They promise a story after supper. They turn mending into a game, asking small fingers to sort buttons by size. They maintain routines because routine suggests that tomorrow still exists. In the afternoon, a disagreement breaks out beside the woodpile. Two men argue about labour shares. Voices rise. One accuses the other of avoiding the hardest work. The argument draws listeners, each carrying an opinion ready for immediate use. Mrs. Reed walks between them holding a dripping blanket. She says there is a sick child trying to sleep, a fire losing heat, and enough work for both men to prove their strength without shouting. Then she hands one man the blanket and tells him to help hang it. The argument ends, not because anyone has won, but because both suddenly look foolish. Gentle sarcasm can be a form of camp government. As evening approaches, women prepare the cabin for another night. Bedding is shifted closer to the warmest wall. A pot of water is placed where it will not freeze solid. Medicines are arranged within reach. Children are checked for damp stockings and cold fingers. The woman who has kept the inventory sits at last. Her shoulders sag. Someone passes her a cup of weak coffee substitute. Another takes the baby from her arms. For several minutes she does nothing except stare into the fire. You understand that endurance is not endless strength. It is strength borrowed, returned, and shared before anyone collapses. Supper is served. Mrs. Reed receives her bowl first this time. No one comments on the change. Around her, the camp settles into its nightly sounds. Spoons touch tin. A baby sighs. Needles continue moving through cloth. Outside, axes fall silent as darkness closes over the valley. The women keep working a little longer. They mend tomorrow's mittens, count tomorrow's flour, and listen for the cough that may worsen before morning. Only when every fire is banked, every child covered, and every pot placed safely aside do they allow themselves to lie down. Winter may be measured in snow and temperature. Inside the camp it is also measured in 1,000 quiet tasks completed before anyone thinks to ask who performed them. Before dawn, an ox bell begins ringing near the river. The sound is uneven and urgent, not the slow, familiar note of an animal grazing. You wake beneath the blankets and listen as it moves farther from camp, then stops abruptly. A man outside calls for a lantern. Within moments, boots strike frozen ground, harness chains rattle, and several figures hurry toward the trees. You pull on your coat, wrap wool around your feet, and follow. The missing ox stands near the riverbank with one hind leg sunk through a crust of ice into deep mud. Its body trembles with effort. Steam rises from its nostrils. Each time it tries to pull free, the ice breaks farther beneath it. The animal is valuable. More than that, it is necessary. Without strong oxen, a wagon cannot move when spring returns. An injured animal may mean abandoning supplies, joining another household, or remaining trapped after everyone else departs. The fate of the family and the fate of the livestock are tied together by wood, rope, muscle, and very poor timing. Men approach carefully with poles and coils of rope. You hold the lantern while Mr. Bell loops a line around the animal's chest. Another rope is secured behind its shoulders. 3 people pull from higher ground while 2 others break ice away from the trapped leg. The oxbell shakes wildly. Mud splashes across coats. One man slips to his knees and rises without comment because dignity is again unavailable. At last the ox lunges forward. Its hoof tears free with a wet sucking sound. The men stumble backward, dragging the animal onto firm snow. For several breaths, nobody speaks. The ox stands with its head low. Mrs. Reed examines the leg by lantern light. There is swelling, but no obvious break. The animals led slowly toward camp, wrapped in an old blanket and given a little grain from the precious reserve. Livestock care becomes one of the hardest parts of winter. Oxen, horses and mules must be watered, fed, sheltered from wind, checked for injury and prevented from wandering. Snow covers grass. Ice makes footing dangerous. Harness sores can worsen under damp hair. Hooves split. Weak animals lose weight even when they appear to eat. Oxen are widely favoured on the Oregon Trail because they are strong, steady, and generally less expensive than horses or mules. They can also survive on rougher forage, though that does not make them invincible. Winter hunger reduces even the calmest animal to a collection of ribs and stubbornness. You join the morning inspection. Each ox is touched along the legs and shoulders. Ice is picked from around the hooves. Damp hair beneath the yoke is rubbed dry. A sore patch receives grease and cloth padding. The animals dislike the attention. One swings its head and nearly knocks your cap into the snow. Another steps neatly onto Mr. Bell's foot and remains there with the serene expression of a creature unaware of legal consequences. Beyond livestock care, dangerous work continues throughout the camp. Snow must be cleared from wagon roofs before its weight stretches the canvas. Paths must be opened between shelters, fires, and the river. Roof poles on the old cabin require inspection after every storm. Frozen branches must be cut before wind brings them down. Men often take the tasks that lead farthest from camp. They hunt, search for forage, cut distant timber, scout the trail, and inspect crossings. These journeys demand strength, but also caution. A person who becomes lost, injured, or soaked may not return before darkness. You accompany a small hunting party after breakfast. The camp needs meat, and tracks have been found upstream. The men carry rifles, powder, knives, rope, and a little food. You carry a blanket and a tin cup because experience has taught everyone that a simple walk can become a very long day. The forest changes as you move away from camp. Axes no longer sound behind you. Smoke disappears between the trees. Snow lies unbroken except for small tracks crossing the slope. You see rabbit marks, delicate and paired. Farther on, a line of prints suggests deer. The hunters move quietly, placing each foot with care. Rifles used by overland emigrants vary widely, from older smoothbore guns to more accurate rifles. Firearms provide hunting power and protection, but ammunition is limited, damp powder can fail, and accidents are a constant danger. A weapon is only useful when handled by someone who is cold, tired, and still capable of good judgment. That final condition becomes increasingly important. At midday, the group finds deer tracks descending toward a narrow ravine. One hunter wants to follow immediately. Mr. Bell studies the sky and objects. Clouds are gathering from the west, and the wind has shifted. The younger man argues that meat may be close. Mr. Bell replies that camp is also close, which is more useful if you wish to sleep there tonight. The discussion lasts only a minute, but hunger presses against caution. You can almost imagine the stew, the fat, the strips of meat drying beside the fire. Then snow begins. The flakes fall thick and sudden, erasing the tracks around your boots. You turn back. Scholars remain divided about how often hunting genuinely improved the food supply of emigrant parties, since successful kills were memorable and commonly recorded, while long unsuccessful searches consumed time, powder, and strength. The romantic image of endless game rarely matches the uneven reality of heavily travelled routes and winter landscapes. The return journey becomes difficult within minutes. Wind drives snow across the slope. Familiar trees lose their shape. The group follows marks cut into bark during the outward walk, but some are already hidden behind white powder. A compass exists, though the metal needle trembles and the local valley bends enough to make direction uncertain. A quirky frontier habit is to watch moss on tree trunks for guidance, assuming it always grows on the north side. It can favour shaded surfaces, but moisture and local conditions make it unreliable. Moss, rather rudely, has never promised to serve as a map. You follow the river instead. Its dark openings appear through the storm, bending back toward camp. The route is longer but harder to lose. One man slips on a buried branch and twists his ankle. He tries to stand, takes one step and sits down again. The group does not leave him. A pole is cut and used as support. His rifle and pack are divided among the others. You wrap the spare blanket around his shoulders while 2 men help him forward. Progress becomes painfully slow. Every 100 yards requires rest. Snow gathers on hats and collars. The injured man apologizes repeatedly until Mr. Bell tells him to save his breath for walking, and his apologies for supper. Near dusk you hear an axe. The sound travels faintly through the trees. Then comes another strike. Someone in camp is cutting wood, and the ordinary rhythm guides you home more surely than any compass. Soon lanterns appear between the wagons. People hurry forward. The injured hunter is taken into the cabin where his boot is removed and the ankle wrapped. The hunting party returns without meat, but everyone returns alive. That counts as success, though it fills no pot. After supper, the men repair tools near the fire. A cracked axe handle is shaved smooth and bound temporarily with rawhide. A wagon brake is tightened. Harness straps are inspected. Snow shovels made from boards are strengthened along the edges. Repair work never ends. Cold shrinks wood and stiffens leather. Iron becomes brittle. Rope frays where it freezes. A small weakness ignored today can become a disaster when travel resumes. You sit near the doorway, rubbing warmth into your hands. Outside, the rescued ox shifts beneath its blanket. The injured hunter rests with his foot raised. No deer hangs from the trees. No heroic tale has emerged from the day. Instead, the camp has gained quieter knowledge. Animals must be guarded. Weather outranks hunger. No one should travel alone, and strength is not proven by pressing farther into danger, but by knowing when to turn back and carrying one another home. The injured hunter's ankle swells through the night. By morning, the skin around it looks tight and discoloured, and he cannot place weight upon the foot without drawing a sharp breath. He insists that nothing is broken. Mrs. Reed replies that bones do not always request permission before causing trouble. She loosens the wrapping, checks the warmth of his toes, and asks where the pain is strongest. The examination is careful, though the tools available are painfully simple. There's no instrument to reveal a hidden fracture, no nearby surgeon, and no reliable way to summon help. The nearest fort might have medicine. It might also be many cold days away. For now, the cabin becomes the infirmary. A bed is made near the warm wall using quilts, sacks, and folded clothing. The hunter's ankle is raised on a wooden box. Snow is wrapped in cloth and placed against the swelling for short periods, then removed before the cold damages the skin. Around him, other illnesses quietly gather. The little girl who had fever is improving, but her cough remains. An older woman wakes with pain in her chest. A boy has cracked lips and refuses water because swallowing hurts. Several people complain of headaches, dizziness, or weakness. These symptoms may come from infection, hunger, smoke, dehydration, exhaustion, or all of them together. Diagnosis becomes a matter of observation. You watch the colour of a person's face. You listen to breathing. You notice whether hands feel hot, cold, dry, or damp. You ask when someone last ate, drank, slept, or passed water. Questions that might once have seemed intrusive now become ordinary parts of care. Disease was one of the greatest dangers faced by overland emigrants. Cholera caused devastating losses during major migration years, especially near contaminated water along crowded routes. Dysentery, respiratory illness, measles, accidents, and infections also threaten travellers, often far from trained medical assistance. Winter changes the pattern of danger. The camp is no longer meeting hundreds of strangers each week, but people now live close together in damp shelters. Smoke irritates lungs. Poor nutrition weakens resistance. A single cough can pass through several families before anyone understands what is happening. The older woman with chest pain is moved away from the smokiest part of the cabin. Her breathing sounds rough. A kettle of water is heated, and she leans near the steam beneath a loose cloth. The warmth may ease her throat and loosen congestion, though care is taken not to burn her face. Someone adds herbs to the water. The cabin fills with a sharp green scent. One traveller recommends mustard spread on cloth and placed against the chest. Another suggests hot onions. A third proposes a strong dose of patent medicine from a small brown bottle. The label promises relief for nearly every known complaint, which is usually a sign that the bottle understands medicine less well than it understands sales. 19th century medicine chests often contain laudanum, calomel, quinine, castor oil, alcohol, herbal preparations, and commercial remedies. Some can ease pain or treat particular conditions. Others may be ineffective or dangerous, especially when dosage is uncertain. Mrs. Reed examines the brown bottle and returns it to the chest. She chooses warm water, rest, and small amounts of food instead. This decision is not made with perfect knowledge. It is made with caution. Professional historians of medicine continue to discuss whether emigrant health outcomes depended more upon the remedies they carried or upon basic nursing practices such as warmth, hydration, cleanliness, and rest. Surviving journals often name medicines, but describe patient care less clearly, even when that care may have mattered more. You begin boiling cloths used around the sick. The task consumes precious fuel, yet dirty bandages can worsen wounds. Needles are passed through flame before splinters are removed. Hands are washed when water allows. Sick children receive separate cups, though the supply of dishes is limited. The camp does not understand every route of infection. Still, experience teaches patterns. People notice that sickness spreads where waste reaches water. They learn that a wound covered in dirt becomes hot and painful. They know that stale air and heavy smoke make coughing worse. Knowledge does not need modern vocabulary to be useful. Frost injury appears after a bitter night. A young man returns from animal watch with 2 fingers pale, numb, and stiff. He laughs at first and says they merely feel asleep. Mrs. Reed sees the colour and becomes serious. The fingers are warmed slowly. They are placed against the man's body beneath dry wool, not rubbed with snow, despite an old belief that snow restores frozen skin. Vigorous rubbing can cause further damage, though the practice remains common enough to be repeated as frontier wisdom. As sensation returns, pain follows. The young man stops laughing. His fingers throb and burn. The skin changes from white to red. He's ordered to remain inside and keep the hand elevated. A peculiar remedy mentioned by some travellers involves placing chilled feet or hands against the warm belly of a dog or livestock animal. The method sounds comic until you remember that living bodies provide gentle, steady heat. The animals do not always cooperate, particularly if the patient smells faintly of bacon grease. The man keeps his fingers beneath his own arms instead. By afternoon, another emergency begins. A woman who is far along in pregnancy feels regular pains. Her family had hoped to reach Oregon before the birth. Winter has rewritten that plan with little concern for convenience. The cabin is cleared as much as possible. Men and older children move outside. Blankets are hung to create privacy. Water is heated. Clean cloth is gathered. The most experienced women take charge. You remain nearby, carrying wood and water when asked. Hours pass. The camp grows unusually quiet. Even the children seem to sense that noise should soften. Snow falls beyond the door while low voices move behind the blanket partition. Childbirth on the trail can be dangerous for both mother and infant, especially when nutrition is poor and medical assistance distant. Yet births do occur along the route, and families often resume travel remarkably soon afterward because weather and supplies allow little recovery time. This birth does not happen quickly. The mother tires, her pains weaken, then return. Mrs. Reed asks for sugar water and presses a warm cloth against her back. Another woman speaks steadily near her ear. There is no dramatic speech, only encouragement repeated in simple phrases. Breathe now. Rest now. Again. Near midnight the baby arrives. The first cry is small, then stronger. Outside, people look toward one another in the darkness. Nobody cheers loudly, but smiles appear across exhausted faces. Someone adds a piece of dry wood to the fire without being told. The infant is cleaned, wrapped, and placed against the mother's chest. Both remain weak but alive. For one night, the cabin holds beginning and illness in the same warm circle. The hunter sleeps with his ankle raised. The older woman breathes more easily. The young man's fingers ache beneath wool. The newborn makes tiny sounds from behind the blanket. You sit near the hearth, too tired to speak. The camp has no doctor. It has observation, caution, shared knowledge, warm water, clean cloth, steady hands, and people willing to remain awake beside one another. Sometimes that is not enough. Tonight, it is. Before dawn, Mrs. Reed finally sits down. Her eyes close while she's still holding an empty cup. You take it gently from her hand and place another blanket round her shoulders. Outside, the snow deepens. Inside, breath rises and falls in many different rhythms, fragile, stubborn, and still present. The newborn's first morning begins beneath a roof patched with canvas and smoke. You hear the infant before you see the child, a thin, wavering cry rising from behind the blanket partition. It is answered by the rustle of bedding, a woman's low voice, and the soft clink of a cup being set near the fire. Outside, the valley remains white and still. Inside, news of the birth travels from wagon to wagon. One family brings a spoonful of sugar, another offers a clean piece of linen. Someone finds a small knitted cap packed away for a grandchild who never joined the journey. The cap is too large, but its edge can be folded. Nothing given is abundant. That is what makes each gift important. The winter camp has begun to change. When the wagons first entered the valley, every household guarded its own blankets, food, tools, and worries. Families slept behind separate canvas walls. Supplies were counted privately. Assistance was offered, but often with one eye fixed upon the giver's remaining store. Now separation becomes harder to maintain. A broken axe affects more than the family that owns it. A sick child may require another household to carry water. A missing ox can prevent an entire wagon company from leaving in spring. Hunger, cold, and illness move freely between neighbours, ignoring the invisible borders people once drew around their possessions. You notice this during breakfast. Your family's fire has burned low, and the wood is too damp to catch. Before you ask for help, a woman from the next wagon carries over an iron pot holding 3 live coals beneath ash. She kneels beside your hearth and places dry bark around them. You both blow gently. Smoke curls upward. A faint orange glow spreads through the bark. Within moments, a small flame lifts between the twigs. She doesn't request payment. Later, you mend her son's torn mitten. The exchange is not recorded in a ledger, yet both of you remember it. Wagon companies often created written constitutions or sets of rules before departure. These agreements could establish elected officers, voting procedures, duties, and punishments for theft or disorder. Such formal arrangements sometimes dissolved under pressure, but the habit of organising collectively remained useful in camp. Your company's original rules are stored in a wooden box. The paper speaks grandly about conduct on the trail. It says little about how much firewood belongs to a mother with a feverish baby, or who should wash the blankets of an injured hunter. New rules develop through practice. Every morning, one person checks the river openings. 2 teams gather fuel. Another group tends livestock. Families take turns preparing a common evening kettle, usually beans or thin stew, to ensure no household finishes the day entirely without food. The arrangement is imperfect. People arrive late, tools disappear into the wrong wagons, someone always believes another person has received a larger portion. Still, the system works often enough to matter. A rough notice board is made from a flat packing crate. Names and duties are written in charcoal. The letters smear when touched, and one child quietly adds the governor of the Snow Kingdom to the water detail. His political career continues despite limited public support. Trade also expands. One family has spare needles but almost no salt. Another owns salt but needs leather for boot repairs. Coffee, buttons, lamp oil, cloth, medicines and ammunition all develop new values according to scarcity. A silver coin may purchase nothing. A dry pair of socks may secure an afternoon of labour. You trade 2 needles for a strip of leather. The exchange feels oddly ceremonial. Both objects are examined, discussed, and passed between hands. The strip is cracked at one edge, but sound through the centre. The needles are slightly bent, though still sharp. Nobody asks what either item cost in Missouri. Winter has created its own economy. A curious form of camp currency emerges in the shape of favours remembered aloud. Someone may say, with gentle emphasis, that he helped pull an ox from the river mud. This is not exactly a request for repayment, but it tends to be mentioned shortly before he asks to borrow a saw. Stories become another item shared. After supper, families gather in the cabin because one larger fire uses less wood than several separate ones. People bring stools, blankets, boxes and cups. Children settle near the warm wall. Adults sit wherever space remains. At first, conversation concerns work. How much snow fell? Which tree should be cut tomorrow? Has the injured hunter's ankle improved? Then the talk loosens. A woman describes her family farm in Ohio where apple trees stood behind the kitchen. A man recalls working beside the Mississippi River. Someone tells of a wedding interrupted by a runaway pig. The pig story receives special attention. According to the teller, the animal entered the church, overturned a basket, and departed wearing part of the bride's veil. Whether every detail is true becomes less important than the laughter it produces. Researchers of migration communities continue to examine whether hardship erased social divisions or merely concealed them for a time. Wealth, religion, region, education, and reputation still influenced relationships within wagon companies. Yet winter dependence could force cooperation between people who might never have chosen one another as neighbours. You see both realities. Old disagreements do not vanish. One man still distrusts a family from another state. 2 women avoid speaking after an argument about missing flour. A traveller who owns more supplies receives visits that may contain equal parts friendship and calculation. Yet when a branch crashes through that traveller's wagon cover during the night, everyone nearby runs to help. The storm arrives shortly after midnight. Wind moves down the valley, twisting snow between the trees. A heavy limb breaks with a crack like a rifle shot and falls across the rear of a wagon. The canvas tears. Children inside begin screaming. You rush from your shelter with a blanket over your shoulders. Lanterns appear through the snow. Men lift the branch while women guide the family into the cabin. Others bring rope, spare canvas, and poles. The repair begins immediately. Hands stiffen in the cold. Snow enters through the opening faster than it can be brushed away. A section of canvas from an old wagon cover is laid across the tear and tied through punched holes. Blankets are fastened inside. Nobody asks who owns the rope. Nobody measures the canvas before cutting it. By dawn, the wagon is rough but sealed. The displaced family sleeps beside the cabin wall surrounded by borrowed bedding. The youngest child holds a wooden toy given by another boy who claims he no longer needs it. You know this is untrue. The toy is his favourite. He watches it leave his hands and then crawls beneath a blanket without complaint. Shared hardship creates its own manners. People learn not to stare when a family's food chest looks empty. They learn to offer help as though it is convenient rather than charitable. They say a pot is too full and must be shared. They claim a blanket is taking up space. They invent reasons to preserve another person's pride. Not every act is generous. A small amount of cornmeal disappears from the common store. The captain gathers everyone in the cabin and asks whether it was borrowed. Silence follows. Suspicion settles over the room. The missing meal is not enough to starve the camp, but theft threatens the trust holding everything together. Private boxes are checked reluctantly. Voices sharpen. Then an elderly man admits taking it. He has been feeding his daughter, whose illness left her unable to eat beans. He intended to replace the meal after trading a tool. The room remains quiet. The captain could punish him under the company rules. Instead, the common store is recounted, and a portion is assigned openly to the sick woman. The man must contribute extra work once his family recovers. The decision satisfies no one completely. Perhaps that is why it feels fair. By evening, the tension has softened. A hymn begins near the fire. One voice joins another. Some people know the words. Others hum. Religious beliefs differ across the camp, but the tune is familiar enough to hold everyone for a few minutes. You sit near the doorway and listen. The newborn sleeps beneath the oversized cap. The injured hunter carves a spoon for the family that repaired his blanket. Children rebuild their stone town under the table, adding a common storehouse and an unnecessarily grand residence for their governor. Beyond the walls, winter continues without sympathy. Inside, strangers have become something more complicated than friends and more dependable than acquaintances. They are the people who know how much flour you have left. They are the people who hear your child cough during the night. They are the people who lend fire, carry water, share stories, and arrive with rope when your roof gives way. You did not choose most of them. Now your survival belongs partly in their hands and theirs rests partly in yours. The common store looks smaller each morning. You notice it first in the spaces between sacks. Where flour bags, once pressed against one another, bare floorboards now show through. The bacon bundle has become a narrow parcel wrapped in stained cloth. Beans remain, but the barrel no longer requires two people to move it. Nothing has vanished suddenly. That would almost be easier to understand. Instead, the food has departed spoon by spoon, bowl by bowl, through hundreds of careful meals that never seemed generous enough to cause such emptiness. Mrs. Reed kneels beside the supplies with the inventory paper on her lap. She counts the remaining portions, pauses and begins again. Around her, several adults wait without speaking. The calculation is no longer about comfort. It's about how little a person can eat, while still gathering wood, tending animals, carrying water, and resisting illness. The company reduces portions once more. Morning porridge becomes thinner. Supper contains fewer beans. Children continue receiving the most reliable servings, followed by the sick and those performing the heaviest labour. Adults with no obvious weakness quietly move toward the end of the line. This arrangement sounds sensible until nearly everyone becomes weak. A person can appear healthy while feeling dizzy each time they stand. Hands shake while lifting kettles. Tempers rise over small mistakes. Sleep becomes restless because hunger has its own voice, a hollow tightening that refuses to be reasoned with. One afternoon, an ox collapses near the woodpile. The animal has been losing weight for weeks. Its ribs show beneath the hide and its injured leg never recovered fully after the riverbank accident. Men try to raise it with ropes, but the ox remains on its side, breathing heavily. Everyone understands what must happen. Nobody wishes to say it first. Livestock were essential assets for emigrant families, but weakened animals were sometimes slaughtered when they could no longer pull or when food became dangerously scarce. The decision could provide meat while also reducing a family's ability to continue the journey later. You stand near the animal's head and place a hand against its warm neck. This ox has pulled the wagon across plains, through mud, and into the valley. It has carried flour, bedding, tools, and children's keepsakes. Treating it as food feels like betrayal. Allowing people to weaken while meat lies before them feels worse. The children are taken into the cabin. The work is done away from the wagons, quickly, and with as little spectacle as possible. No one celebrates. When the meat is carried back, it is divided according to household size and need. The hide is saved, the bones are saved, the fat is saved with particular care. Even the horns may become useful for spoons, containers, or handles. Hardship does not permit the luxury of using only the familiar portions. Fresh meat changes the camp's mood. The smell of it cooking draws people toward the central fire. Strips are cut thin and hung near smoke to preserve them. Larger pieces are frozen outside, protected from dogs and scavengers. Bones simmer in kettles until the broth grows cloudy and rich. For the first time in many days, grease shines on the surface of your bowl. You drink slowly. Warmth seems to spread from your stomach into your chest and arms. Conversation strengthens. Children ask for more and are given a little. The meal brings relief, but also a new silence. Everyone knows another animal may soon be chosen. A small and unusual trail practice involves boiling hooves until the softened material releases a glue-like substance. This can be used for repairs, though the smell is powerful enough to make an entire cabin reconsider whether the broken object truly needs fixing. Leather itself also enters conversation. One man claims old harness can be boiled until it becomes soft enough to chew. Another says he once heard of travellers eating pieces of rawhide during famine. The camp examines several straps with expressions that combine hunger and deep personal disappointment. Leather can provide a little nourishment after prolonged boiling, especially if grease remains in it, but tanning chemicals, dirt, and age may make it unsafe or nearly useless as food. For now, the harness remains attached to its proper purpose. Still, the fact that people discuss eating it changes something. The valley contains possible wild foods, though winter hides them well. Small groups search exposed slopes and river edges for roots, inner bark, seeds, and any plants they recognize with confidence. Rose hips may remain on thorny stems. Cattail roots can sometimes be dug from wet ground. Certain tree layers may be processed in emergencies, though they are hardly a pleasant substitute for bread. Knowledge becomes as valuable as strength. An older woman recognizes a patch of dried plants near the river and warns everyone not to gather them. Their roots resemble an edible variety but may cause severe illness. Hunger makes resemblance dangerous. Researchers still disagree about how often emigrant parties relied upon wild winter foods. Since many travellers lacked detailed local knowledge and written accounts, tend to mention unusual meals only when conditions became extreme. You find a handful of shriveled rose hips beneath a hedge. They are hard, seedy, and faintly sweet. Mrs. Reed steeps them in hot water. The drink is weak, but its sharp flavour wakes the mouth after weeks of beans and flour. Children receive the first cups. They call it berry tea. The adults call it something different in private, mostly because hope sounds more convincing when served to children. As supplies fall, the moral strain deepens. A sick woman cannot digest the common stew. She needs softer food, perhaps flour boiled into gruel. Yet flour is now the camp's most precious store. Giving her more may help her recover. It may also reduce what remains for several children. The decision is discussed quietly. Her family offers a tool, a blanket, and future labour in exchange. Mrs. Reed refuses the bargain. Illness is not a marketplace, she says, though winter often tries to make it one. A portion of flour is assigned to the woman for 3 days. The choice is written on the common board, so no one believes food has disappeared secretly. Transparency does not erase resentment. One man mutters that his own children are thin. Another replies that they are still eating. Voices harden until the captain reminds everyone that any of them may require the same mercy next week. The word mercy hangs in the room. It sounds gentle. In practice, mercy has weight, volume, and a measurable number of spoonfuls. The camp begins weighing people's need by signs rather than claims. Can the person stand without swaying? Can the child stay awake? Is the mother producing enough milk for the newborn? Can the woodcutters complete their journey? No method feels fair. Equality would give everyone the same amount. Survival may require giving more to those in greatest danger, or to those whose labour supports many others. Writers on migration hardship have long debated whether rationing systems strengthened community or exposed existing power. Records reveal both generosity and favouritism, sometimes separated by only a single meal. You witness a smaller version of that conflict when the last dried apples are found in a chest. There are 9 pieces. The camp contains far more than 9 children. A lottery is suggested. Then Mrs. Reed cuts each apple slice into several tiny fragments and stirs them into one large pot of porridge. No one receives a whole piece. Everyone receives the taste. It is not perfect justice, but the children smile when sweetness reaches their bowls. That evening another weak animal is examined. A mule has stopped eating and stands with its head lowered. Its owner refuses to consider slaughter. He says the mule carried his wife's belongings and saved the wagon during a river crossing. Nobody presses him yet. People understand attachment, even when they cannot afford it. The camp chooses to share a little grain with the animal for 2 more days. That grain could have thickened several meals. The choice may prove foolish. It may also preserve the mule long enough to recover and pull again in spring. Winter offers no clean answers, only decisions that reveal what people are willing to risk for one another, for animals, and for the future they still hope to reach. After supper, you scrape the pot with a wooden spoon. The broth is thin again. The rich ox meat has been portioned, smoked, frozen, and guarded. Tomorrow's meals will be smaller than today's, yet tonight the newborn has eaten. The sick woman has swallowed her gruel. The children have tasted apple. Outside, the weakened mule stands beneath a blanket chewing a little grain. You bank the fire and look toward the shrinking store. Soon patience itself will feel rationed. The deepest part of winter has not yet released the valley, and now survival depends upon enduring the long days when there is little left to do except wait, remember, and keep hope from becoming another supply that quietly runs out. The deepest winter does not arrive with one dramatic storm. It settles over the valley by degrees, adding one quiet layer after another until the world beyond the wagons seems to have disappeared. Snow covers the old trail. Ice seals most of the river. The trees stand motionless beneath a pale sky, and even the wind grows tired, leaving behind a silence so complete that you can hear the cabin logs contract in the cold. Waiting becomes the hardest labour. There are still chores, of course. Fires require fuel, water must be drawn, animals need care, clothing needs repair. Yet each task now fits into a narrow path worn through the snow, and every day resembles the one before it. You wake in darkness, you stir the coals, you eat a thin breakfast, you work until the light fades, then you return to the same crowded shelter, surrounded by the same faces, sounds, smells, and worries. Time loses its edges. Someone scratches marks into a wooden post to count the days. Another traveller insists the count is wrong because 2 marks were added after one particularly long evening. A debate follows, though no one can explain what practical difference the missing day might make. The calendar matters because spring must exist somewhere beyond the snow. Families travelling the Oregon Trail usually plan their journeys around seasonal limits. Mountain crossings become dangerous or impossible after heavy snowfall, while spring travel depends upon grass growth, river conditions, and the strength of surviving livestock. A stranded company cannot simply resume movement when people grow impatient. The land decides when the road returns. For now, the land says no. You step outside after breakfast and look toward the slope where grass once showed through. Wind has smoothed the surface into long white curves. No wagon ruts remain. No distant travellers appear. The company is isolated. That knowledge presses upon people differently. Some grow quiet, some become irritable. Some speak endlessly, perhaps fearing what might enter the silence if they stop. A man who once complained about noisy children now follows them around the cabin, offering suggestions for their games. The children receive these suggestions with appropriate suspicion. Confinement creates small conflicts. Someone moves another person's cup. A blanket is borrowed without permission. A wet coat drips onto carefully dried firewood. The cabin door is left open for 3 seconds too long, allowing cold air to sweep across the floor. Each mistake feels larger because there is nowhere else to go. You learn to apologize quickly. You also learn to pretend not to notice certain habits. Mr. Bell hums the same 4 notes whenever he mends harness. The injured hunter taps his spoon against his bowl. One woman clears her throat before every sentence, even when the sentence is only yes. Tolerance becomes a survival skill, so does routine. The camp assigns particular hours to familiar activities. Morning is for water and animals. Midday is for repairs, lessons and wood preparation. Evening is for shared meals, stories, songs and prayer. These patterns do not shorten winter, they give it shape. On certain afternoons, the cabin becomes a workshop. Boots are lined along one wall. Harness straps lie across the table. Children sort scraps of cloth by size. Adults carve spoons, mend gloves, twist cord, and smooth damaged tool handles. Nothing is thrown away without inspection. A broken comb may provide thin pieces of material for buttons. A cracked cup can hold needles. A worn blanket may be cut into strips for foot wrapping. One peculiar winter pastime involves carving tiny objects from fruit pits, bone, wood, or scraps of horn. Travellers make buttons, rings, animals, whistles, and miniature household items. The work occupies restless hands and turns almost worthless fragments into gifts. The injured hunter carves a tiny ox for the child who gave away his favourite toy. The animal has 4 uneven legs and an expression of profound confusion. The child treasures it immediately. Music enters the evenings whenever energy allows. A fiddle has survived in one wagon, protected through river crossings and storms inside a wooden case. Its owner takes it out carefully, checks the strings, and warms the instrument near the fire. The first notes sound thin in the cold air, then the wood responds. A familiar dance tune fills the cabin, and feet begin tapping against the floorboards. There's not enough room for proper dancing, but 2 children turn in a small circle until they become dizzy and fall laughing into a pile of blankets. Adults smile despite themselves. The fiddler plays a hymn next, then a song about home. Several voices join him. Some are strong, others drift uncertainly around the melody. You sing quietly. The words bring images of kitchens, fields, gardens, and people left behind. For a moment, homesickness feels almost physical, like pressure beneath the ribs. Yet the song also reminds you that those places remain real. Historians continue to examine whether music and communal worship primarily strengthen morale in stranded emigrant camps, or sometimes deepened grief by reminding travellers of lost homes and absent relatives. The surviving accounts suggest that comfort and sorrow often arrive together. Prayer follows many evenings. Not everyone shares the same beliefs or customs. Some speak formal words from memory. Others offer brief thanks for food, warmth, or recovery. A few remain silent with heads lowered. The prayers rarely ask for wealth now. They ask for weather. They ask for strength. They ask that children remain well and animals remain standing. They ask for one more day. Humour survives beside faith. It appears in small remarks, imitations, exaggerated complaints, and stories repeated until everyone knows when to laugh. Mr. Bell announces that his beard has become thick enough to shelter a family of mice. A child suggests charging them rent. Another man claims the coffee substitute is improving. Someone answers that his sense of taste is failing. Laughter moves around the fire, gentle and brief, but real. You begin to understand that humour does not mean people are unafraid. It gives fear somewhere to rest. The nights remain difficult. Wind shakes the branches. Wolves sometimes call from beyond the valley, their voices carrying through the dark. The livestock shift nervously when they hear them, bells sounding near the trees. Wolves rarely attack a guarded camp filled with people and fire, but the sound awakens old fears. Children pull blankets over their heads. Adults check rifles, lanterns, and animal ropes. One traveller swears that wolves can count the number of people beside a fire and wait until one leaves. This strange belief spreads among the children, who begin counting themselves loudly before anyone visits the river. The wolves, if listening, receive very accurate camp records. More troubling than animal cries are the moments when no sound comes at all. You wake before dawn and hear only breathing inside the wagon. The silence beyond the canvas feels immense. You imagine the trail buried forever, the food store empty, the river frozen to its bed. Then someone turns beneath a blanket. An ox bell gives one soft note. The fear loosens. Small celebrations are created to separate one week from another. A birthday is marked with a spoonful of sugar stirred into porridge. A recovering patient receives a paper crown made by the children. The newborn's first month is celebrated with a song and a clean blanket. One evening, the camp holds a contest for the finest repaired mitten. The entries are displayed on the table. Some are carefully stitched. Others are patched so heavily that the original mitten has nearly vanished. The winning pair belongs to an elderly man who accidentally sewed one thumb closed. The judges claim artistic merit. He reopens it before morning. Outside, the snow remains deep, but changes begin too subtle to trust. A drop of water falls from the cabin roof during midday. The river ice gives a low, booming sound. Sunlight lingers a little longer against the western trees. People notice these signs and avoid speaking of them at first. Hope can be dangerous when announced too early. Still, you feel something shifting. At dusk, you stand beyond the wagons and breathe the cold air. Smoke rises almost straight upward. The sky holds a faint band of gold above the ridge. Behind you, the fiddle begins again. The tune passes through the cabin walls, softened by distance. Someone laughs. A baby cries, then quiets. A pot lid lifts and settles. These sounds are ordinary now. That is their power. Winter has reduced life to repeated motions, but repetition has kept the camp alive. Fires are lit. Water is carried. Portions are shared. Stories are told. Each day is endured not as one heroic struggle, but as a collection of small acts performed again, before courage has time to disappear. You turn back toward the warm light. The snow still holds the valley, but somewhere beneath it, water is moving, roots are waiting, and the hidden trail has not forgotten where it leads. The first true thaw begins with a sound. Not birdsong, not running water, but a soft collapse above your head as a sheet of snow slides from the wagon roof and lands beside the wheel. The impact shakes the canvas. A child wakes, gasps, and asks whether the mountain has fallen. You listen. Drops strike the roof one by one. All winter water has arrived as ice, snow, or labour. Now it gathers along the canvas seams and falls freely. The sound is delicate, almost cheerful, yet nobody trusts it at first. A thaw can be as dangerous as a freeze. Snow softens into heavy slush. River ice weakens. Frozen ground becomes mud. Roofs leak. Slopes release branches that have been held in place for weeks. Paths that supported boots in the morning may swallow them by afternoon. You crawl outside and find the valley transformed by brightness. Sunlight flashes across the snow, water threads down tree trunks. The air smells different, carrying damp soil, wet bark, smoke, and something green beneath the cold. The children notice it immediately. They begin searching for bare ground as though it were buried treasure. A dark patch appears beside the cabin wall. Then another opens near the central fire, revealing trampled grass, ash, buttons, wood chips, and several objects everyone assumed had vanished forever. A spoon emerges from the mud. So does one mitten. The shoe lost inside the wagon remains unexplained, but the outdoor world is returning its own collection. People leave the cabin and stand in the sunlight longer than necessary. Coats are opened at the neck. Faces are tilted upward. One man removes his cap, then replaces it when a drop of icy water lands directly on his head. Spring has a sense of humour. The Oregon Trail travelling season usually resumes only when conditions permit animals to graze and wagons to move without sinking deeply into mud. A few warm days do not guarantee safe departure. Grass must recover, rivers must be judged, equipment must be repaired, and weakened teams must regain enough strength to pull. For the camp, the thaw is not freedom yet, it is an inspection. Snow retreats first from the southern slopes. Men walk there to examine the grass. Pale shoots appear beneath flattened yellow stems, thin and uncertain. The livestock are led out carefully and allowed to graze for short periods. The oxen lower their heads with sudden interest. Even the weakest mule begins chewing. Its owner stands nearby, smiling in a manner he would deny if questioned. Animals that survived the winter look altered. Hides hang loosely over ribs. Hair has grown long and rough. Hooves need trimming. Old harness saws must be checked before any yoke is fitted. You run a hand over the shoulder of the rescued ox. The animal is gone now, its strength carried into the camp through broth, smoked meat, hide, horn, and memory. Another ox stands in its place, thinner than before but upright. Every survivor carries the absence of something. As more ground appears, the cost of winter becomes visible. Broken branches lie beneath the trees. Firewood stumps around the camp in widening circles. The snow reveals discarded cloth, cracked bowls, worn rope, and pieces of harness cut apart for repairs. Near one wagon, the polished serving dish appears beneath a melting drift. You'd placed it in the discard pile months ago. Snow buried it before anyone carried it away. Its surface is dull now, stained by mud and weather. You lift it carefully. For a moment, you remember the table at home. Warm bread, familiar voices, and your mother's hands setting the dish in the centre. The memory arrives without warning and leaves you standing silent beside a wagon wheel. You do not place the dish back into the wagon. It is still too heavy. Instead, you wash it at the river and set it on a flat stone near the cabin. That evening, the children use it to hold buttons while sorting repairs. The object has lost one purpose and gained another. Farther beyond the wagons, the thaw reveals the graves. They were dug when the ground was hardest, shallow despite hours of work. Stones and logs were placed above them to discourage animals. Snow softened every outline during winter. Now the markers lean. People walk out in small groups to repair them. No one speaks loudly. Names are carved more deeply into wood. Stones are reset. Mud is packed around the bases. The child leaves the tiny paper boat made during the fever weeks, though the paper will not survive the next rain. Overland emigrant graves were often marked with wood, stone, or carved inscriptions. But many disappeared through weather, fire, animals, road building, and time. The trail held countless private losses that later travellers passed without recognising. You stand beside the markers and try to imagine leaving them behind. During winter, the dead remained close to camp, held within the same valley and beneath the same snow. Departure will create distance, and distance feels like another kind of loss. Researchers still differ over how stranded families understood such graves. Some writings describe sacred places that tied survivors to the landscape, while others treat burial sites with painful practicality because travel allowed little time for prolonged mourning. Your camp does both. There is prayer, there is silence. Then someone returns to repairing a wheel. Grief and labour occupy the same day. The wagons require careful attention. Canvas covers are patched where sparks, branches and ice created holes. Floorboards are examined for rot. Wheels have dried unevenly beside fires, loosening wooden joints. Iron tyres must fit firmly around the rims before travel. A traditional repair uses heat to expand an iron tyre before placing it over a wooden wheel. Water is then poured across the metal, causing it to contract and grip tightly. In camp, equipment is limited, so smaller adjustments rely upon wedges, rawhide bindings and patient hammering. The sound of repairs fills the valley. Hammers strike iron. Saws cut boards. Harness leather is softened with grease. Wagon tongues are checked for cracks. One family discovers that mice have built a nest inside a folded blanket using paper, wool fibres, and part of a written sermon. The mice appear to have selected the longest page. Perhaps they required substantial insulation, or perhaps even rodents recognize material that benefits from editing. Supplies are counted again. The numbers are grim but clear. There is enough flour for a limited period. Beans remain. Smoked meat hangs in narrow strips. Ammunition is low. Salt is nearly gone. The company cannot remain much longer. Yet leaving too soon could destroy the wagons in mud, or exhaust the animals before grass becomes plentiful. People begin walking sections of the trail each afternoon. They push poles into the ground. They inspect slopes where snow remains deep. They watch the river rise with meltwater brown and fast beneath broken ice. A crossing that looked gentle in autumn now churns with branches and floating slabs. Nobody suggests entering it yet. The company waits on higher ground. A charming bit of camp forecasting develops around the frogs. One evening a child claims to hear a faint croak near the river and announces that spring has officially arrived. Adults listen. Nothing follows. The next night several croaks sound from the wet grass. The child accepts congratulations as though personally responsible. Birds return soon afterward. Small dark shapes move through the branches. Their calls feel startling after months of wind, axes, coughs and silence. Geese pass northward, reversing the journey you heard in the autumn darkness. This time, their voices do not warn of retreat. They suggest movement. The newborn is carried outside in a blanket to feel sunlight on its face. The injured hunter stands with a stick and tests his ankle. The young man, whose fingers froze, flexes them slowly, though two remain stiff. People compare what has healed and what has not. The camp itself begins coming apart. Brush walls are dismantled. Useful rope is reclaimed. Canvas roofing is removed from the cabin. Wood too heavy to carry is stacked neatly for whoever may arrive next. Someone places the broken spoon from the abandoned shelter on a peg inside. Beside it goes a small bundle of dry kindling. A future traveller may find both. Before sunset, you climb the northern rise and look down over the valley. The wagons stand exposed among patches of snow and mud. Smoke rises from the final shared fires. The river glitters between broken plates of ice. The place looks smaller than it did during winter. You can see how closely everyone lived, how narrow the paths were, how little separated warmth from cold, safety from danger, and one family's trouble from everyone else's. Beyond the trees, faint lines reappear across the open country. The trail is returning. It does not look welcoming. It looks wet, damaged, and uncertain. Still, it leads west. Tomorrow, the company will test the first wagon on the softened ground. Soon the yokes will rise again, the bells will sound, and the valley that held you through winter will begin slipping behind. The first wagon moves just after sunrise. You stand beside the team while the driver tightens the reins and speaks softly to the oxen. Their shoulders lean into the yoke, chains grow taut. For one long moment the wheels remain fixed in the mud, as though the valley has decided not to release them. Then the rear wheel turns. It lifts from the dark ground with a deep sucking sound, rolls forward half a circle, and settles into the softened trail. The second wheel follows. Mud gathers around the rims, but the wagon continues. People watch without cheering. Too much depends upon those first few yards. The wagon crosses the clearing, climbs the lower slope, and reaches firmer ground beyond the trees. When it does not sink, the captain raises one hand. The signal passes through camp. You're leaving. Canvas is secured. Bedding is rolled. Cooking pots are packed while still warm. The last water buckets are emptied onto the fire, sending steam through the morning air. Children make final searches beneath wagons for buttons, stones, toys, and treasures invisible to adults. The child who governed the Snow Kingdom finds one acorn animal beside the cabin wall. He places it in his pocket with great ceremony. Nothing else from the kingdom can be carried. The old cabin stands open now, its temporary roof removed. The 3 rough walls remain much as you found them, though smoke has darkened the logs and hundreds of hands have polished the doorway. A bundle of kindling rests near the hearth. A clay jar holds several dry matches wrapped in cloth. On one peg hangs the broken wooden spoon. Someone has carved a message into the wall: "Shelter here." The words are simple enough for a frightened traveller to understand. You touch the carving before stepping away. Overland travellers often left messages for those following behind, sometimes written on paper at landmarks, carved into wood, or entrusted to forts and trading posts. These notes could report trail conditions, warn of danger, announce deaths, or tell separated relatives that a family had passed safely. Your message contains no names. It offers only what mattered most when you arrived. Shelter here. The wagons form their lines slowly. Strong animals are placed at the front to test the ground. Weaker teams follow along the firmest ruts. People walk beside the wheels, carrying poles, ready to push or pry when mud grips the wood. The newborn rides inside a wagon, wrapped in the oversized knitted cap. The injured hunter walks with a stick for part of the morning, then accepts a place beside the driver when his ankle begins to ache. The young man with stiff fingers carries no heavy rope, though he insists upon leading an ox. Everyone leaves differently from how they arrived. Some bodies are thinner, some faces are older, some seats inside the wagons remain empty. Before the line moves beyond the trees, families turn toward the graves. There is no long ceremony. The river is rising and the trail ahead remains uncertain. Hats are removed, heads lower. A prayer is spoken in a voice nearly lost beneath the sound of water. Then the first wagon bell rings. You walk west. The trail is barely visible at first. Snowmelt has filled the ruts, making 2 shining channels through the grass. Your boots sink into mud. Each step pulls at the soles, and soon the hems of every garment are stained. No one complains about the mud for at least an hour. After months of frozen ground, it feels almost generous. The valley falls behind gradually. Trees conceal the cabin. Smoke disappears. The slope hides the graves. At the final turn, you look back and see only bare branches, patches of snow, and a thin opening where the wagons passed. The place that contained your entire world is already becoming landscape. A peculiar custom among some travellers is to collect a small stone, flower, or piece of wood from an important campsite. Such objects may later be kept as reminders of births, deaths, storms, or moments of deliverance. You choose a smooth riverstone from your pocket. It is the same shape used for mending stockings during winter. You carry it west. The company moves cautiously through the day. Mud clogs the wheels and must be scraped away with boards. Animals stop often to graze on new grass. The weak mule survives the first climb, to the immense satisfaction of its owner, who gives everyone the expression of a man vindicated by history. At midday, a wheel sinks nearly to the hub. Ropes are attached. Men and women push together. Children carry smaller supplies from the wagon to reduce its weight. The oxen strain, hooves sliding. You remember the winter wood train and the runaway log. Someone mentions it. Laughter breaks through the effort. The wheel rises. That is how the company now solves trouble. Not quickly, not elegantly, but together, and with enough remembered absurdity to make hardship bearable. The social order formed in the valley continues onto the road. Water teams remain organized. Food is still counted openly. Families with stronger animals help weaker wagons across difficult ground. Nobody pretends each household can survive entirely alone. Observers still debate how long such intense cooperation lasted once emigrant groups escaped immediate danger. Shared necessity could create deep bonds, but old divisions and private ambitions often returned when conditions improved. For the moment, the winter community holds. At supper, the common kettle is placed over the fire once again. The meal contains beans, a little smoked meat, and early greens gathered near the river. The greens taste bitter, but everyone praises them extravagantly because they are fresh. Birdsong surrounds the campsite. After the long silence of winter, the noise feels almost excessive. Frogs call from shallow pools. Insects move above the grass. Wind carries the scent of wet soil instead of snow. The children run farther from the wagons than they have in months. Adults call them back from habit. As evening settles, you sit beside the fire and examine the polished serving dish. It has returned to the wagon after all, though not as a dining treasure. Inside it lie needles, buttons, leather scraps, the carved ox, and several smooth stones. Your mother's dish has become a repair box. That seems appropriate. The journey has altered the meaning of nearly everything. A wagon became a house. Newspaper became clothing. Oxhide became shelter. Strangers became neighbours. Hunger made a spoonful of flour feel valuable, and grief made an ordinary wooden marker feel sacred. You thought survival would arrive as courage. More often it arrived as repetition. Someone rose before dawn. Someone carried water. Someone gave away part of a meal. Someone stayed awake beside a fever. Someone walked back through snow with an injured companion. The Great Westward Migration is often remembered through distances, maps, and promises of land. Yet families experience it through smaller measures: the weight of a sleeping child, the last dry mitten, the smell of beans, the sound of an axe, and the hand that reaches for a rope when a wagon sinks. Night gathers over the new campsite. The road still stretches ahead. Mountain passes remain, rivers remain. Oregon is not yet visible beyond the western horizon, but winter is behind you. You lie beneath the wagon canvas and listen to water moving freely nearby. No axe breaks river ice. No wind presses snow against the walls. The oxen graze in darkness, their bells sounding softly through the grass. Your body remembers the valley. It remembers cold boards beneath blankets and newspaper rustling inside boots. It remembers the newborn's cry beneath the patched roof. It remembers the first drop of thawing water. Perhaps that memory will never leave. Perhaps it should not. You close your eyes as the wagon settles on its wheels. Tomorrow you will rise and walk west again. Tonight you are moving even while still. Word count 1,189. The fire beside the wagons grows lower now, and the voices around it become quieter. You no longer need to count every sound. The river moves gently through the darkness, carrying small reflections of stars across its surface. Grass bends around the resting animals. Somewhere beyond the circle of light, a bird calls once and becomes silent. You have followed the families through early snow, through hunger, smoke, sickness, and the long white stillness of waiting. You have stood beside them as ordinary objects became precious, and ordinary kindness became the structure holding life together. Now the road softens beneath evening mist. The wheels are quiet. The canvas above you rises and falls slightly with the breeze, almost like slow breathing. Warm blankets settle across your shoulders. The cold valley is far behind, hidden among dark trees and fading snow. You do not need to walk any farther tonight. The people beside you will tend the last coals. They will watch the animals. They will listen for changes in the weather. The road will remain where it is until morning. Let the wooden wheels grow distant. Let the river carry away the counting of flour, the cracking of ice, and the restless questions that filled the winter nights. The geese have turned north. The grass is returning. The smallest green shoots are rising through the earth without hurry, without noise, trusting the season to continue. Your breathing can follow that same quiet rhythm, slowly in, slowly out. The campfire becomes a gentle orange glow behind your closed eyes. Beyond it lies the open trail, peaceful beneath the stars, waiting without demanding anything from you. You're warm, you're sheltered. You have reached the safe side of winter, and as the final ox bell fades into the soft spring darkness, the journey drifts onward without you, quieter and quieter, until only the river remains, whispering beside the sleeping wagons, sweet dreams.